I was cut from Thanksgiving by my own family. They didn't know I'd just bought a $6 million estate, so I invited everyone else they'd cast aside. When the photos hit the internet, my phone exploded. That speakerphone call burned every bridge of fake family ties. Tonight, I raise a glass and drop the bomb that changes everything. My name is Morgan Rogers. I am 32 years old, and my life is surgically divided between two places that want nothing from each other. Most of the year, I live in Port Azur, in a glass-walled apartment where the Pacific hurls itself against the rocks below. The air here is sharp with salt and money. The other part of my life, the part I've kept secret, is at Gallatin Ridge, a property tucked into the mountains near Bozeman, where the silence is so deep it feels like a physical weight. I am a software engineer by training, an entrepreneur by necessity. I built a company. I sold it. I moved between the cold, logical world of code in Port Azur and the rugged, quiet truth of the mountains. Today, I was in Port Azur. The morning fog was burning off the water, and the only sound was the distant bell of a buoy and the restless wind whistling through the gap I kept open in the floor-to-ceiling window. My phone, a black slab on the cold granite island, vibrated. I didn't look at it for a minute. I knew the rhythm. It was 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. This was the time of the annual dance, the careful choreography of family obligation. I dried my hands from the sink and picked it up. It was from my mother, Diane. The text was short, clinically precise. This year our Thanksgiving is small, just Natalie, Grant, and the kids. I read it twice, not, "We'd love to have you, but we're keeping it small," not, "Would you mind if we just did something with the grandkids?" It was a statement, a closing of the door, an announcement of a party to which I was not invited. The just was the key. Just the real family. Just the important ones. My thumbs moved before my brain did. I typed 2 words. Have fun. I hit send. I placed the phone, screen down, on the counter. The vibration was silenced. For a long moment, I just stood there, a perfect still frame. Me, the empty white kitchen, the churning gray-blue ocean outside. The wind filled the silence, cold and impersonal. It didn't care. Neither, I realized, did I. Not in the way I used to. The old, familiar ache was there, but it was faint, like a scar on a nerve that had already died. The text was just a shovel turning over old earth, and my whole life was a graveyard of these moments, all centered on my sister. Natalie. Natalie was the sun. I was the shadow. It was that simple, that primal. Natalie was homecoming queen. She was cheer captain. She had perfect, effortless grades and a waterfall of blonde hair that everyone wanted to touch. She was the person my parents presented to the world as their masterpiece. I was the quiet one, the weird one, the one who lived inside books and, later, inside the glowing green text of a command line. I remembered being 16. I had spent 6 months in a state-level competitive programming contest. I beat 400 other students. I won. I built an algorithm that solved a logistical routing problem for emergency services, and I won. I came home with a heavy, ridiculous gold-plated trophy. I put it on the dining room table. My mother glanced at it. "Oh, that's nice. Dear, is it dusty?" She was on her way to the phone. "Natalie, honey, is that you? Did you decide on the blue dress or the silver for the formal?" My father, Robert, was reading the paper. He didn't look up. "Good job, kid," he mumbled, turning the page. "Natalie, your mother's calling you." I put the trophy in my room. I think it ended up in a box in the garage. When I was 15, I taught myself Python from a stack of library books that smelled like dust and old glue. I was fascinated. I decided to build something for them, something to show them what I could do, to translate my world into theirs. I spent an entire summer writing a piece of software. It was an automated family photo organizer. Our digital photos were a disaster. Thousands of files dumped into random folders. My script scanned everything, read the metadata, used a primitive facial recognition library to tag people, and sorted 20 years of memories into a clean, searchable, chronological archive. I was so proud. I called them into my room. "Look," I said, my voice high with excitement. "I fixed the photo library. You can find any picture, any year, just by typing a name." My father squinted at the screen. He watched me demo it. Tidy," he said. He cleared his throat, a sound he always made before changing the subject. "So, Natalie, tell me again about this boy who asked you to the prom, the one with the boat." I closed the laptop. They never used the program. The photos stayed in their messy folders. I was speaking a language they had no interest in learning. Then came Harrison Tech. I poured my entire soul into getting in. It was the best engineering school in the country. When the acceptance letter arrived, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely tear it open. I walked into the kitchen, holding it out. "I got in," I whispered. "I got into Harrison Tech." Diane was measuring flour. "Oh, that computer school," she said, not looking at me. "Well, that's practical, I suppose. Make sure you get a sensible job. You know, Natalie's fiancé, Grant. He works in finance. Very sensible." There was no celebration. There was no, "We're proud of you." There wasn't even a flicker of surprise. Just an immediate comparison, a belittling, a reduction of my life's dream to practical. My first year at Harrison was the loneliest I have ever been. I was surrounded by people who finally spoke my language, but I was haunted by the silence from home. I'd call, bursting to talk about a project, a breakthrough in my AI lab. The conversation would be cut short. "That's lovely. Morgan, listen, I have to go. Natalie is having her engagement photos taken and she needs my help with the outfits. Can you believe it? In a vineyard?" I learned to stop talking about my life. I learned to just ask questions about theirs. Natalie's wedding was the grand performance, a 300-person, 6-figure spectacle at a historic country club. I was a bridesmaid, stuffed into a pale peach dress that made me look ill. My job was to be silent and hold the bouquet. At the reception, I walked through the glittering ballroom, looking for my place card. I wasn't at the family table. That was for Natalie, Grant, his parents, and our parents. I wasn't at the next table, with the close family friends. I was at table 19, in the back, by the kitchen doors, with a distant second cousin I'd never met, his bored teenage kids, and 2 of my father's employees who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The sting was so sharp, so public. It literally took my breath away. I sat there for the toasts, my smile frozen on my face. Then, I saw one of the catering staff drop a tray of glasses. She looked frantic. I stood up, slipped off my ridiculous heels, and walked through the swinging doors into the steamy chaos of the industrial kitchen. I started helping. I cleared plates. I stacked glasses. I ended the night not as a guest, but as an unpaid busgirl, sharing a cigarette with a waitress on the loading dock. It felt more real, more honest, than anything happening in that ballroom. That night set the pattern for every holiday to follow. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. I would drive or fly in, and before I could even set my bag down, I'd be handed an apron. "Morgan, thank goodness you're here. The potatoes need mashing. Morgan, can you handle the dishes? The sink is overflowing." I would spend the entire day in the kitchen, a designated servant, while the real family gathered in the living room. Natalie and Grant would be on the sofa. Their perfect children, my nieces and nephews, paraded out to perform a new song on the piano or show off a drawing. The sound of their laughter, my father's booming voice telling a story, my mother's high-pitched approval, it all filtered into me over the sound of the garbage disposal and the clatter of plates. I washed. I dried. I scrubbed the roasting pan. I packed the leftovers into containers for Natalie's family to take home. I was useful. I was the help. But I was not, it seemed, family. The final proof was on Facebook. My parents, who hated to travel, who had never found the time to fly to Harrison Tech, not once, not even for my graduation, who had never once come to Port Azur to see the life I was building. But they had time for Natalie. The pictures were bright, glossy, and relentless. There was Diane and Robert in Tuscany, grinning, holding wine glasses on a sun-drenched terrace with Natalie and Grant. There they were on a Disney cruise. My mother wearing mouse ears, holding my nephew's hand. There they were in Aspen for a ski trip, all of them in matching sweaters. "It's just such a long flight to the coast," my mother would say when I asked, her voice full of false sympathy. Tuscany was longer, but they went. All those years, all those cuts, all those moments of being erased, they didn't just disappear. They compounded, they built up, layer by layer, solidifying inside me. It started as a promise, a quiet vow I made to myself while scrubbing turkey grease off a pan at midnight. One day, I will have a different table, a table where I set the rules, a table where I decide who sits there, a table where no one is handed an apron unless they are the chef. Back in my apartment, the phone buzzed again. I flipped it over. The screen lit up. A new message from Diane, right below the first one. "Hope you understand." I stared at the words, and for the first time, I did. I understood perfectly. It was never about the space at the table. It was never about the size of the dinner. It was about appearances. It was about the perfect, curated family image they wanted to present. And I, the quiet, intense, software nerd daughter, the one who built things instead of married them. I didn't fit the picture. The old scar tissue inside me didn't just ache. It tore open. But what came out wasn't sadness. It was ice. I picked up the phone, my reflection staring back at me from the dark screen. My eyes were cold, clear, and absolutely steady. I understood. The game was over. It was time to start a new one. My time at Harrison Tech was a blur of labs and libraries. I graduated at the top of my class, and I did exactly what my parents had begged me to do. I got a practical job. I became a cog in the massive, polished machine of Northwood Labs, a legacy software company that specialized in optimizing databases for industries that were already dying. I was good at it. I wore sensible blouses. I contributed to my 401k. I optimized code that was already obsolete. On the rare family calls, my parents sounded relieved. "Did you hear?" Diane would say to some relative on speakerphone. "Morgan is at Northwood Labs. Yes, very stable. We're so glad she finally got all that experimenting out of her system." Natalie sent me a congratulations gift basket filled with bland office supplies and a book on portfolio management. They thought I was finally broken in. I lasted 22 months. I hated every single second of it. I hated the bureaucracy, the pointless meetings, the way every good idea was smothered by middle management. I saw the gaps in the market, the real problems we were ignoring, especially in security. Northwood's approach was a joke, a fortress with the front gate wide open. So I quit. I cashed out the small 401k, ignoring the tax penalty, and I jumped. My first idea was not Aegisgate. My first idea was a catastrophic, naive, spectacular failure. It was a business-to-consumer app, a travel security tracker. I burned through my savings in 8 months. The app launched to the sound of crickets. It didn't just fail, it detonated, taking every cent I had with it. I was 30 years old. My checking account was a negative number. My credit cards were maxed out, the balances screaming at me in bright red text every time I dared to log in. I moved out of my sterile Port Azure apartment and into a shared house in a neighborhood that smelled like wet pavement and old frying oil. My room was a converted back porch, drafty and damp, with a cracked linoleum floor. My desk, my new corporate headquarters, was a hollow core door I'd bought for $5 at a salvage yard, laid across 2 mismatched plastic filing cabinets. I was sitting at that door desk, staring at a final disconnection notice from my server host, when I had the idea. The travel app was garbage, but the back end, the security framework I had built to protect its data, that was strong. I knew it was. It was agile, it was aggressive, and it was built on a philosophy nobody else was using. I needed runway. I just needed a little time, Maybe 3 months. Maybe $20,000 to keep the servers online and buy me enough food to function. I did the one thing I swore I would never do. I picked up the phone. I swallowed the thick, metallic taste of my own pride, and I called home. My father, Robert, picked up. His voice was jovial, relaxed. He was probably just back from golf. "Morgan, what a surprise. Everything all right?" I kept my voice flat, professional, the way he liked it. "Everything's fine. Dad, I'm actually in the middle of a new business venture. I'm developing a new cybersecurity architecture. The framework is solid, but I'm in a temporary capital bind. I was hoping I could get a small bridge loan, just to get it to the first VC pitch stage." Silence, a heavy, dead silence on the line. I heard the muffled sound of his hand covering the receiver, the indistinct murmur of him repeating my words to my mother. "Business venture," I heard him scoff. He came back on the line. The jovial dad was gone. The disappointed CEO was here. "Morgan, this project, it's a fantasy. You had a good job at Northwood, a real job, a stable future. You threw it away." Before I could defend myself, I heard the phone shift. Diane. Her voice was a cascade of pity, which was always so much worse than his anger. "Honey," she began, her tone the one she used for sick neighbors. "We just want you to be realistic. This isn't a game. You're not in college anymore. Look at your sister. Natalie works hard in finance. She has a portfolio. She has a plan. She just bought a lovely vacation condo. You know, why can't you just be practical, like Natalie? Why does everything have to be so dramatic?" "It isn't dramatic. Mom, it's a business. I just need a bridge." "We are not," Robert cut in, his voice cold and final. "Going to finance your hobby. We're saving for a trip to see the grandchildren. You need to grow up. Morgan, you need to call Northwood, apologize, and beg for your old job back." The line clicked. He had hung up. I sat there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. Hobby, realistic, like Natalie. The humiliation was a physical thing. It felt like I'd been punched in the solar plexus, a hot, sickening vacuum. I didn't cry. I was too empty, too cold. I was just done. That phone call was the last time I ever asked them for anything. It was the last time I ever expected them to understand. The rejection didn't break me. It forged me. It burned away the last, stupid, cancerous scrap of hope that they would ever, truly, see me. I was on my own. It was a terrifying, and in a way, beautiful realization. I hung up the phone. I looked at my bank account. Negative $243. Hobby? I stood up. I went to the tiny kitchen I shared with 3 roommates who played video games until 4 in the morning. I opened the cupboard, passed their half-eaten bags of chips, and pulled out the 20-pack of instant ramen noodles. That was it. That was the new budget. My life shrank to the 4 walls of that damp porch room and the glowing pixels of my monitor. I didn't just work. I went to war. I stopped sleeping. I'd code for 16, 18, sometimes 24 hours straight. I was fueled by nothing but bitter, cheap instant coffee and a burning, cellular rage. I stopped using the lumpy mattress. I'd just pass out at the door desk, my cheek pressed flat against the keyboard. I'd wake up an hour or 2 later with the tiny square imprints of the keys tattooed on my skin, a mirror image of the code that filled my brain. I cut every expense. I sold my old textbooks, my decent coat, my spare monitor. I took on freelance bug testing gigs, $10 here, $50 there, scrambling for enough money to keep the lights on and the server running. I funneled every spare cent into the project. I named it Aegis Gate. The first version was still tied to the old travel app logic. It was bulky. It wasn't working. 3 months went by. The credit card companies were calling 20 times a day. I was at the end. I was days, maybe hours, away from being completely, irrevocably broke. Days away from having to make the call to Northwood, to admit my father was right. I was staring at the architecture diagram at 3 in the morning, my eyes feeling like they were full of sand. It was all wrong. I was trying to sell them a fortress, but fortresses were obsolete. I wasn't selling a product, I was selling a philosophy. I highlighted the entire project folder. 90 days of frantic, desperate work. I hit the delete key. I started over. From scratch, I threw out the consumer junk. I threw out the bulky, defensive walls. I focused on one thing, and one thing only. A modular, aggressive, zero-trust security architecture designed for medium-sized enterprises. Companies that were too big for off-the-shelf junk but too small to afford the massive, seven-figure contracts from the industry giants. I built it clean. I built it fast. I built it hungry. 2 weeks later, I was monitoring a regional banking forum, looking for leads. I saw a developer from a local bank, Gallatin Valley Bank, complaining in veiled terms about a persistent vulnerability they couldn't patch. I knew that vulnerability. It was a zero-day exploit, a ghost in the system that had been rumored for weeks, but wasn't public. I looked at my new Aegisgate code. I looked at the exploit pattern. I spent the next 48 hours, without sleep, adapting one of my new modules. I didn't ask permission. I didn't send a marketing email. I compromised their test server politely, and I patched the hole. Then, I sent an email to their chief technical officer. Subject: I fixed the zero-day exploit you don't know you have. My inbox was empty for an entire agonizing day. I was convinced the police were on their way. The reply came at 5:03 in the morning. It was 2 sentences. Who the hell are you? Get to my office, now. I put on my only clean shirt, the one I'd washed in the sink. I went to the meeting. I walked them through the patch. I showed them the Aegisgate framework. They didn't arrest me. They gave me a pilot contract. It wasn't for millions. It was for $50,000. But it was real. It was a lifeline. I walked out of that bank building into the bright morning sun, holding the signed PDF on my phone. I felt dizzy, lightheaded from hunger and lack of sleep. My phone buzzed. For a wild second, I thought it was my mother. Some psychic echo. It wasn't. It was from Rowan, my old team lead from Northwood Labs. He was the only one who, when I quit, had pulled me aside and said, "They're idiots here. Go build the future. Call me when you do." We hadn't spoken in a year. His text said, "Heard a rumor you just poached Gallatin Valley Bank from under the nose of Oracle. Knew you could do it. Drinks on me." I stood on that street corner and, for the first time since the phone call with my father, I cried. It was just one text, but it was from someone who saw it, someone who believed it was possible. I transferred the money to my account. I paid my rent. I bought a week's worth of actual groceries. And I learned the single most important lesson of my life. I didn't call my family. I didn't text them the good news. I didn't forward the email. They didn't deserve the update. They had told me to be realistic. They had called my life's work a hobby. Their validation was not only worthless, it was poisonous. If I told them, they'd find a way to minimize it. Oh, just a small local bank Natalie's firm just landed a national account. Or worse, they'd suddenly be interested, asking for details, trying to claim a piece of it. No, I would stay silent. I would work. I would let them live in the world where I was the impractical, dramatic failure. My new motto was simple. You don't argue with people who misunderstand you. You just keep doing the work. You do it until you are so successful, so powerful, so present, that your very existence becomes an undeniable fact. You work until you cannot be ignored. That night, back in my damp porch room, I used $100 of the new money to pay for a real-time analytics dashboard. I linked it to the new Aegisgate business account. I put it up on a second monitor. For the first time, the revenue graph wasn't a flat, deadline at 0. A small green bar appeared. The first bar, $50,000. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was the start of the siege. The $50,000 contract from Gallatin Valley Bank was not a windfall. It was a key. It was the proof of concept I needed. That small green bar on my analytics dashboard became my only focus. I poured every cent of that initial payment back into Aegisgate. I hired my first 2 engineers, both smarter than me, both refugees from big tech companies who were tired of being practical. We worked out of my porch room for another 6 months. Then we moved to a windowless, shared office space above a dry cleaner. Then, we got our first real office. It was 2,500 square feet in a boring glass tower in Port Azur. The view was of another boring glass tower. It was beautiful. Aegisgate grew systematically, quietly, relentlessly. The banking sector was our entry point. After Gallatin Valley, we signed 3 more regional banks in 6 months. The zero-trust model worked. It was leaner, faster, and more secure than the bloated systems the giants were selling. We hit 120 employees. I opened a second office, a massive data and development hub in Red Mesa, a city in the high desert known for cheap power and a deep pool of engineering talent. We were a real company. I was a real CEO. I was still living on instant ramen, but my people had health insurance and competitive salaries. My family, of course, knew nothing. The calls home, which I now made only on major holidays, were exercises in bland minimalism. "How's work, Morgan?" my mother would ask, her voice already distracted. "It's fine. Mom, busy. How's Natalie? How are the kids?" "Oh, just wonderful. Grant is up for a huge promotion, and Natalie is redecorating their guest bathroom. Marble. You should see it." I never corrected them. I never said, "Actually, Mom, I'm the CEO of a 120-person cybersecurity firm." I just let them talk. I let them think I was still the practical daughter in her sensible job at Northwood. Their ignorance was a shield. Then came the first big lockpick, a contract with the Critical Infrastructure Security Agency. It was a federal contract, a massive, multi-year deal to protect a sector of the national power grid. We were vetted for 9 months. They tried to break our code in every way conceivable. They failed. We won the bid over 3 legacy companies whose names were household words. That contract changed our valuation overnight. It was the ultimate stamp of legitimacy. The second lockpick followed. A national retail chain, one with 5,000 stores, needed to secure its entire point-of-sale network after a devastating public breach. They didn't want a practical solution. They wanted an aggressive one. They wanted Aegisgate. We were not a hobby. We were a market force. And then Orion Apex Group called. Orion Apex wasn't just a big tech company. It was a global leviathan. They owned cloud services, hardware divisions, and AI labs. They didn't innovate. They acquired. Their security division was their one weak link, and they knew it. Aegisgate was a threat, but it was also the perfect, ready-made solution. The negotiations were a 5-month-long war of attrition. Their lawyers flew to Port Azur. We sat in a glass-walled conference room for days on end. They wanted to buy the company, dissolve the brand, and absorb my engineers into their Borg-like collective. I said no. They offered more money. I said no. They threatened to build a competing product and crush me. I smiled and said, "You could have. You didn't. You're here because you can't." I had only 2 non-negotiable terms. First, my entire staff of 120 people was to be retained, with their salaries and titles guaranteed for a minimum of 36 months. Second, the Aegisgate source code and its warranty would remain under a separate, protected entity for 5 years, managed by my lead architect, to prevent Orion from burying or corrupting it. "You are buying a living system," I told their lead negotiator, a man with a $10,000 suit and dead eyes. "You don't get to chop it up for parts. You buy it whole, or you don't buy it at all." They hated it. They postured. They walked out twice. I let them. I knew they'd be back. My tech was protecting a piece of the U.S. government. They didn't just want the code. They needed the pedigree. On the final day, after 5 brutal months, they agreed to every single term. The final contract was slid across the table. I looked at the number at the top of the signature page. $340 million. My hand did not shake. I picked up the pen. I signed Morgan Rogers with the same steady, bored disinterest of someone signing a credit card receipt. I shook their hands. I thanked them for a productive negotiation. I walked my team out, and we went for a beer at the dive bar down the street. We didn't celebrate. We just sat there. quietly, and drank to the fact that we had won. That night, I went back to my apartment in Port Azur, the same one I'd moved back into, the one with the view of the Pacific. I closed the door. I stood in the silent, empty living room, the city lights glittering below. $340 million. I started to laugh. It was a strange, rusty sound, like a piece of machinery that hadn't been used in years. It wasn't a laugh of joy. It was a laugh of sheer, cosmic absurdity. The girl who had been denied $20,000 because she wasn't practical like Natalie. The girl who had lived on ramen and spite. The laugh broke. It cracked in my chest and turned into a single, dry sob. I sat down on the floor, my back against the cold glass window, and I cried. I cried for 15 minutes. Alone in the dark, I cried for the girl at the kitchen sink, for the girl at table 19, for the girl who woke up with keyboard marks on her face. I let all the exhaustion, the years of compressed rage and loneliness, just pour out. Then I stood up, I went to the bathroom, I washed my face. It was done. I didn't tell my family. The money was wired. The press releases went out. My name was in the financial journals, but they didn't read those. As far as they were concerned, I was still just Morgan, the sensible, quiet disappointment. I didn't buy a Ferrari. I didn't buy a penthouse in Manhattan. I didn't buy an island. I went to Montana, to Gallatin Ridge, the mountain region I'd fallen in love with during that first desperate pilot project. I found a property. It was 50 acres of dense pine forest, rolling hills, and a private, glacier-fed stream. It was utterly, profoundly silent, and on it, I bought a house. It wasn't a mansion, not in the gaudy way Natalie would have understood. It was a masterpiece of glass, steel, and reclaimed timber, built into the side of a hill, overlooking the entire valley. It cost $6 million, and I paid in cash. It had a main house with a wall of glass 30 feet high. It had a 3-bedroom guest house. It had a 2-story library with a rolling ladder, a private movie theater, a full gym. I hired a local property manager, a quiet, hyper-competent man named Miles. I told him I had one priority renovation. We worked for 4 months. We tore out the perfectly good kitchen and installed a professional chef's kitchen, a 6-burner Wolf range, walk-in pantry, 3 ovens, and a temperature-controlled wine cellar. We carved miles of private hiking and snowshoeing trails through the pine forest. We dredged the small lake on the property and stocked it with native cutthroat trout. I built a sanctuary, a fortress of peace. And as I built it, a new fantasy took shape. I imagined Thanksgiving. I pictured myself calling my parents, Robert and Diane, calling Natalie. This year, I'd say, "Why don't you come to my place?" I pictured them arriving, the drive up the long, private road. I pictured them stepping out of the car, their faces pale with shock. I saw them walking into the great room, staring at the 30-foot glass wall and the snow-capped mountains beyond. I pictured my father, Robert, speechless for the first time in his life. I pictured my mother, Diane, running her hand over the stone fireplace, her mind frantically trying to calculate the cost. I imagined serving them a perfect meal at the massive 12-foot oak dining table. In this fantasy, this would be the moment, this house, this proof, this undeniable $6 million fact would finally shatter their narrative. They would see me, they would apologize, we would finally be a family. Everything would change. The renovations were finished the second week of November. Miles had just left. The house was spotless, perfect. The florists had delivered the arrangements for the main hall. I was standing at the massive kitchen island, cutting the stem of a final, perfect white lily. The afternoon sun, that unique, golden Montana light, was pouring through the windows, setting the entire room ablaze. The house was warm, silent, and ready. I felt a sense of peace I had never known. It was done. My phone vibrated on the granite countertop. I wiped my hands and picked it up. A text from my mother. Diane. This year our Thanksgiving is small, just Natalie, Grant, and the kids. I read the words. The golden light streaming through the window suddenly felt harsh. The warmth evaporated. The air in the massive, beautiful room was instantly, bitingly cold. I looked at the text. I looked at the $6 million house. I looked at the chef's kitchen built for a feast. I looked at the silent, empty dining table that could seat 20. My fantasy, the one where they finally saw me, dissolved. It was so stupid, so naive. I was still that kid, holding up a trophy, begging them to look. Even with $340 million, I was still waiting for their permission to exist. The patience, the decades of quiet endurance, didn't just run out. It snapped. It wasn't anger. Anger is hot. This was cold. It was the calm, clean click of a lock. The old game was over. I was done playing. I was done waiting. I looked at my phone. I looked at the huge, empty, perfect house. I opened my contacts. My thumb scrolled past Diane, past Natalie, past Robert. It stopped on Emmett, my uncle, the one who had always been too loud for my mother's holidays. A new plan began to form, a much better one. If they're keeping it small, I thought, my fingers already typing. I'm going big, I dialed. My Uncle Emmett picked up on the second ring. His voice, as always, too loud for a microphone. Morgie, what's shakin'? Kid, you calling to wish me an early happy turkey day? Sort of, I said, keeping my voice level. What are your plans? Are you heading to Mom and Dad's? A short barking laugh came down the line. Me? Are you kidding? No, I got the boot. I wasn't invited. Seems I'm not on the A-list this year. Diane said something about keeping it, what was the word? Intimate. Just Natalie, her high-finance husband, and the perfect kids. Guess my bad jokes and my old truck don't make the cut. Intimate. The same excuse as small. A polite, clean word for excluded. So, no plans? I pressed. Nah, just me. A store-bought frozen pizza. And whatever terrible football game is on. Why? Good, I said. The decision was instant, clean. Change of plans. How do you feel about Montana? There was a long pause. Montana like the state. Like the state. I have a new place. It's a big place. Lots of seats at the table. I'm sending a car. Your first-class ticket will be in your email in 5 minutes. Morgie. Kid. I don't know what to say. Are you serious? I can't afford. It's handled. Uncle Emmett. I cut him off. My voice warm but firm. I'm not asking. I'm telling. Pack a warm coat. See you Wednesday. I hung up before he could argue. One down. I scrolled through my contacts. Aunt Laurel, my mother's cousin. She was a gentle soul who always brought a tragically bad green bean casserole, the one Natalie always made fun of as soon as Laurel left the room. I called. Same story? Oh, no, dear, she said, her voice thin. Diane called last week. They're keeping it very tight this year. Just the immediate family. I think it's to impress Grant's parents. You know they're very particular. Heard the same thing, I said. So you're free. Well, yes, I suppose I am. See you Wednesday, Laurel. What, Morgan? What are you talking about? Montana. First class. And please, bring the green bean casserole. I hung up. Next, Great Aunt June, 80 years old, sharp as a tack. And my mother couldn't stand her because she asked nosy questions about finances and Grant's bonuses. Her story. Not invited. Dear. Diane said they're having a very modern Thanksgiving. I'm afraid I'm too traditional. My answer. June. You'll love Montana. It's extremely traditional. The car will pick you up at noon on Wednesday. My cousins, the ones with the 3 loud, happy, rowdy kids that my mother was always shushing. The text from my cousin Mike was blunt. Cut. Natalie said the noise gives Grant a headache. My reply. The kids can scream their heads off in Montana. I have 50 acres. Booked all 5 of you. I made 18 phone calls in 1 hour. 18 people, all family, all cut, all given a polite, sterile excuse that revolved around Natalie, Grant, and the need for a smaller, quieter, more intimate gathering. The 19th call was to my Aunt Ruth, my father's sister, a notorious gossip who always knew the real story. "Oh, honey, it's just awful," she whispered, as if the line was tapped. "You didn't hear it from me, but I got the whole truth from your cousin Sarah, who cornered Diane at the market." "What truth?" "Ruth?" I asked, pacing the great room. "It's Grant's parents. They're finally coming for Thanksgiving, and Diane is terrified of them. Their old money, Morgan, very starched." And Diane said, and I quote, "She wanted the dining room to look classy and sophisticated this year, not like a chaotic family reunion. She said she only wanted the successful parts of the family there." There it was. Classy, sophisticated, successful. I wasn't successful. Uncle Emmett and his old truck weren't successful. Aunt Laurel and her casserole weren't successful. The cousins with the loud, happy kids weren't successful. We were the chaff. We were the clutter. We were the embarrassing relatives you hide in the kitchen when the good company arrives. It was the sting of the bridesmaid dress at table 19, magnified by a factor of 20. My mother wasn't just having a small dinner. She was curating an audience. She was filtering her family for pedigree. "Thanks, Ruth. That's all I needed," I said. "But wait, what's happening? Where are you?" "Montana," I said. "See you Wednesday." I hung up and stared at the dark screen. Classy. I sent a single group text to the 19 people I had just invited. "Correction, my mother is having a classy Thanksgiving. I'm having a better one. My table will be big enough for all of us." The replies were instant. Shock, laughter, and unified, enthusiastic acceptance. But I wasn't done. If this was a table for the unclassy, the clutter, the unsuccessful, then I needed to redefine family, my family. I put down the phone and opened my laptop. My fingers flew. I went into my old email archives. Mr. Doyle, my high school computer science teacher, the man who had stayed after school 3 days a week to teach me advanced data structures because I was bored in his class. The man who told me, "You think differently. Morgan, don't ever let anyone call that a problem." I found his number. "Mr. Doyle, this is Morgan Rogers." "Yes, that Morgan Rogers. It's been a long time. What are you doing for Thanksgiving?" "No, that won't do. I'm sending a car. Montana. I'm flying you out." "Why? Because you're the first person who ever saw me." Next, Mrs. Hartley, my old neighbor from my first tiny apartment in Port Azure, the elderly woman who used to collect my mail when I was working those 16-hour days. Who would leave a thermos of hot soup outside my door when it was raining? "Mrs. Hartley, you've never seen mountains like this. Pack your knitting. The car will be there Wednesday." My 2 co-founders from Aegisgate, the ones who had sat in that windowless office with me, the ones who believed in the zero-trust model when it was just a frantic sketch on a whiteboard. Both were single. Both usually just worked through the holiday. My text was simple. "Pack it up. We're going to the Ridge. All expenses paid. Bring your laptops if you want, but you won't be opening them." And finally, I opened the Aegisgate alumni chat for the Red Mesa office. The data hub was full of brilliant young engineers, many of them transplants from all over the country, thousands of miles from their families. My message was a broadcast. "This is Morgan. Anyone in Red Mesa who doesn't have a place to go for Thanksgiving, I've chartered a plane. It leaves Wednesday at 10 a.m. from Red Mesa Regional to Gallatin Regional. My property manager will meet you. If you're far from home, this week, you're home with me. There are 40 seats." The chat exploded. I closed the laptop and buzzed Miles on the house intercom. He appeared instantly, his tablet in hand. "Miles, we have a significant change in plans." He didn't even blink. "Go ahead, Ms. Rogers. We are no longer preparing for a quiet holiday. We are expecting, I'm counting, approximately 45 guests, starting tomorrow, arriving through Wednesday." "Very good," he said, his fingers already tapping. "I'll need to secure the overflow rooms." "Already done," I said. I've block booked 10 rooms at the lodge at Timberline. Just in case. I need shuttles. Black SUVs. We're running continuous airport transfers from Gallatin Regional for the next 48 hours. First-class tickets for all domestic guests. Business for the 2 coming from London. The charter from Red Mesa is confirmed. Miles nodded. I'll coordinate the drivers. Next, food. I walked toward the chef's kitchen. This kitchen is ready, but we need a general. I'm hiring Chef Aurora Vale. Miles raised an eyebrow. The first flicker of surprise I'd ever seen from him. Aurora Vale was a legend. She'd earned 2 Michelin stars at her restaurant in Chicago before abruptly quitting to do private, exclusive events. She's expensive, Miles noted. I don't care, I said. I want my unclassy family to eat the best meal of their lives. Call her, double her fee, tell her she has an unlimited budget and my entire kitchen. I want everything. And, I continued, I want a photographer, not an event photographer. I want a photojournalist, someone who captures moments, not poses. Get me Cade. Cade was known for his candid, raw portraits. I want this documented. I want every real laugh, every hug, every surprised face. I want proof. Aurora and Cade. Consider it done, Miles said. One last thing. Miles, the gifts. I handed him a list I'd been compiling as I made the calls. These go in their rooms, the guest house or the lodge. I want them personalized. It was a long, detailed list. A brand new, top-of-the-line fly fishing rod and reel for Uncle Emmett, who loved fishing but used ancient, rusted gear, a rare first-edition copy of a poetry book for Aunt June, a massive, complex Lego architecture set for Mr. Doyle, because I knew he built them to relax, for the cousins' kids. I'd ordered art supplies, astronomy kits, and books. I had made a specific note at the bottom of the list, which I'd underlined twice. Nothing for the children that is violent, no toy guns, no aggressive video games. This is a sanctuary. Miles read the list, looked up, and for the first time, I saw the hint of a real smile. This is quite the party, Ms. Rogers. It's not a party, Miles, I said, looking out the massive window at the valley. It's a statement. Understood. He turned to go, then paused. I'll run the timeline check. Flowers will be refreshed Wednesday morning. We'll check the sound system for the great room. And I'll run a diagnostic on the backup ovens in the guest house, just in case Chef Vale needs the extra capacity. Thank you, Miles. He left. I was alone again in the massive, silent house. But it wasn't silent anymore. It was thrumming. It was the hum of dozens of lives, all converging on this point. The logistics were in motion. The tickets were booked. The chef was being called. The rooms were being prepared. My phone buzzed. It was a reply from Aunt Ruth. Morgan, what did you mean? Your table will be big enough. What's happening? I smiled and typed one word. Everything. The call started on Tuesday morning, the day before the first guests were scheduled to arrive. The frantic, coordinated activity of the past day, the charter jets, the first-class bookings, the hotel confirmations had lit up the family gossip network like a string of firecrackers. I knew it was only a matter of time. I was in the guest house, reviewing the room assignments with Miles, when my phone, silent on the reclaimed wood table, lit up with her name, Natalie. I picked it up. I didn't say hello. I just waited. Morgan. Her voice was tight, falsely casual, that breezy, dismissive tone she used when she was fishing for information. Hey, just checking in. You haven't called. I've been busy, I said. Right. Well, just wanted to see what you were doing for Thanksgiving, since, Mom's thing is so small. The fake pity was so thick, I could have choked on it. She was calling to confirm I was alone. She was calling to enjoy the image of me with a frozen dinner, feeling sorry for myself. I have plans, I said. Oh, a flicker of surprise. Oh, that's nice, with friends from work. She was already formulating the narrative, my sad little friendsgiving. No, I said, looking out the window at the team setting up heated walkways. I have plans with family. The silence on the line was instant and absolute. It was a vacuum. I could hear the tiny digital static of her brain trying to compute. Family, she finally said, the word high and sharp. What? What family? Everyone is. I mean, Mom said. Who is left, she was asking. Who could you possibly have that we didn't already claim? I let the silence stretch for another 2 beats. I let her sit in it. The ones who want to be there. Natalie. I pressed the red icon. The call was over. My thumb moved immediately to the settings. I tapped the small airplane icon. Airplane mode. The cellular signal vanished. The Wi-Fi signal vanished. My phone, my connection to their world, went dark. It was a one-click boundary. A digital door slammed shut and locked. I looked at Miles, who was pretending not to have listened. The reception team, I said, my voice perfectly calm. Let's talk about that. He looked up from his tablet. Yes, Ms. Rogers, given the high-profile nature of the guest list and the sudden activity, I was going to recommend we install a temporary security checkpoint at the main gate, just a simple one, to manage access. I thought about it for a second. A gate, guards, a checkpoint. It felt wrong. It felt like their world. A world of velvet ropes and lists designed to keep people out, to measure their worth before they were allowed in. No, I said. No gate. This is a home, not a fortress. I don't want anyone to feel processed. But access, he pressed gently. How do we manage it? We manage it with hospitality, I said. I'll give your reception team the full manifest, 45 names. Everyone on that list gets a warm welcome. The shuttles, the charter, the local taxis. They're all pre-cleared. Everyone on that list belongs here. If a name is not on that list, they are not a guest. They are a visitor, and we are not accepting visitors. Politely, but firmly. They are turned away at the property line. Understood, he said. Hospitality is the boundary. I like it. Exactly. No one who belongs here will feel a moment of friction. Anyone who doesn't will feel a very polite, very immovable wall. Give the list to the team. Names only, no titles, no affiliations, just the names. He made a note. They are all VIPs. Correct. Every single one. Miles left, and I walked from the guest house back to the main house. The air was cold, snapping with the clean scent of pine and impending snow. The house was humming. In the kitchen, I could hear the sound of metal on metal, the low murmur of voices. Chef Aurora Vale had arrived with her team of 4. She wasn't what I expected. She was small, in her 50s, with her hair pulled back in a severe bun and the most intense, focused eyes I'd ever seen. She looked less like a chef and more like a tactical commander. She was standing in front of a massive whiteboard, mapping out the prep schedule. Chef Vale, I said. She turned, wiped her hands on her apron. Ms. Rogers. Welcome. Everything is to your satisfaction. The kitchen is acceptable, she said, which from her was the highest possible compliment. I've reviewed the guest preferences you sent. We're prepared. She gestured to the menu scrawled on the board. It was poetry. It was a direct, surgical strike against every classy and sophisticated meal my mother had ever aspired to. This wasn't just turkey. It was 3 turkeys, 1 deep-fried in peanut oil, 1 smoked over applewood for 12 hours, and 1 traditionally roasted with a black truffle and butter injection. There was a dry-aged prime rib, a cedar-planked salmon from the local stream. For the sides, she was reclaiming the classics. Aunt Laurel's green bean casserole was on the list, but Aurora's version was made with fresh foraged mushrooms, hand-fried shallots, and a bechamel sauce infused with Gruyere. There was a potato gratin with 5 cheeses, a cornbread stuffing with chorizo and roasted chilies, a vegan butternut squash tart, 10 different pies, all handmade, from scratch. I said. This is incredible. It's Thanksgiving, she said, as if it were obvious. It should be overwhelming. It should be too much. Abundance is the point. Cade, the photographer, was in the corner, wiping down a lens. He was the opposite of Aurora Young, dressed in worn jeans, quiet. He came over. "We reviewed the storyboard," he said, his voice low. "I don't have a storyboard," I said. "Exactly," he smiled. "Aurora and I discussed it. The story is arrival. The story is contrast. The story is no posing." He pointed his camera at the menu. "The story starts here, the work. Then it's the faces. The moment your uncle sees the fly rod. The moment your old teacher steps into the library. The moment your cousin's kids realize they can run, and no one is going to shush them." "No posed family photos," I said. "God, no," Cade scoffed. "Posed photos are for people who are trying to prove something. You're not. We're capturing the truth. The relief on their faces, that's the shot." This was why I hired them. They understood. This wasn't a performance. It was an antidote. I left them to their work and went into the great room. The sun was beginning to set, and the light was turning that sharp, cold gold. The dining tables were in place, not one, but two massive, parallel tables of dark oak. They ran the length of the glass wall. 45 chairs. I walked the length of them. I ran my hand over the back of a chair. No head of the table, no children's table, no important section. Just two long, democratic, equal lines. This was the answer to table 19. This was the answer to the kitchen sink. This was the answer to classy and sophisticated. I walked into my office, a small room off the library, and found a stack of simple, cream-colored note cards. I picked up a pen. I wrote a note to myself, and I tacked it to the pinboard above my desk. 5 words. No need to prove, just enjoy. I stood there for a long time, just reading those words. It was a reminder to myself. This whole massive, expensive, complicated operation wasn't for Natalie. It wasn't for Diane or Robert. It wasn't a performance for them. I wasn't holding up another trophy, begging them to look. I was throwing a party for the people I loved, the people they had thrown away. The goal was not to make my parents jealous. The goal was to make my guests happy. The jealousy would just be a byproduct. Later that night, I was standing in the great room alone. The catering teams were gone for the night. The house was silent. Miles's team was doing a final lighting test. They brought the lights up slowly. Soft, warm pools of gold light illuminated the 2 long tables. The crystal glasses, set for 45, glittered. The silverware gleamed. The room was vast, warm, and empty. It was a stage set for the perfect reunion. I stood in the shadows, watching. I saw my reflection in the 30-foot glass wall, a pale ghost superimposed over the dark valley and the first pinpricks of stars. I was in the background. I was in the wings, and that, I decided, was where I would stay. I had built the stage. I had hired the actors. I had funded the production. But I would not be the star. I would not stand at the front and make a big speech. I would not walk around, demanding gratitude. My gift was the absence of obligation. The meal, the rooms, the warmth, it was all unconditional. The performance was their part of the family. The be pretty, be successful, be quiet, impress Grant's parents' part. My part was be real. I took my phone out of my pocket. I had kept it on airplane mode for 8 solid hours. I turned it off. A small, defiant part of me wanted to see the fallout. The missed calls, the frantic, escalating texts from Natalie, then Diane, then my father, but I didn't. I let the screen go black. They had put me on silent for 32 years. They could wait a few more days, outside, beyond my reflection. The sky over Gallatin Ridge wasn't black. It was a deep, impossible, violet blue, the color of a fresh bruise, or a coming storm. It was beautiful, and it was mine. The first shuttles were scheduled for 6 in the morning. I was ready. I was awake before the sun. I came downstairs at 6 a.m., drawn by the smell. The house, my vast, silent house, was already alive. It smelled like my childhood Thanksgivings should have smelled, not like burnt edges and anxious silence, but like slow-roasted spices, browning butter, and deep, rich pumpkin. I padded into the kitchen. Aurora Vale and her team were already in full command. They moved with a silent, terrifying efficiency. There was no shouting, just the rhythmic, hypnotic thwack, thwack, thwack of a razor-sharp knife on a wooden board. A sound of pure competence. Aurora, in a crisp white apron, was piping a complex lattice onto a pie, her focus absolute. She nodded at me, a tiny dip of her chin, and went back to her work. This was her domain, and I was just a guest. I had never been happier to be irrelevant in a kitchen. I took a mug of coffee and went to the great room. The 30-foot glass wall was a sheet of deep indigo, just beginning to bleed with a pale yellow light at the far edge of the mountains. The 2 long tables were set, the crystal and silver catching the first hint of dawn. The house was a promise, a vessel waiting to be filled. At 8:03 a.m., the first black SUV crunched up the gravel of the long drive. I stood by the door, my heart thumping a strange, unfamiliar rhythm. This was it. The driver opened the rear door, and my Uncle Emmett unfolded himself from the seat. He was wearing his best, which was still a flannel shirt and clean jeans, and holding his ancient, cracked leather duffel bag. He stepped onto the flagstone path, looked up at the facade of glass and stone and timber, and just stopped. He stood frozen for a full 10 seconds, his mouth slightly open. He looked from the soaring roofline to the snow-dusted peaks behind it, then back to me. "Morgie," he whispered. The man whose voice always rattled the windows. He whispered, I thought you said you had a new place. I didn't know you. I mean, hell, kid, this ain't a place. This is a national park." I laughed, a real laugh, and went out to hug him. "It's just a house. Uncle Emmett, get in here. You're freezing." I grabbed his duffel bag. He was still staring as I pulled him inside. "The fly rod is in your room," I said quietly. His head snapped toward me, his eyes wide. "How did you—" "We'll fish the stream tomorrow." The next SUV arrived, and the next. It was a perfectly timed, steady stream of arrivals, orchestrated by Miles. Aunt Laurel stumbled out, saw me, and just burst into tears. "Oh, Morgan. Oh, dear. I brought the casserole." She held up a foil-covered dish as if it were an offering. "Aurora is saving a spot in the oven for it. Laurel," I said, hugging her tight. "It's not Thanksgiving without it." She wept into my shoulder, and I knew it wasn't about the house. It was about the invitation. By 10 a.m., the house was full. The charter from Red Mesa had landed, and the alumni from Aegis Gate poured in, their young, brilliant faces looking around in pure awe. The cousins' kids arrived, 3 of them, ranging from 6 to 10. They stood in the entryway, paralyzed by the scale, their parents hissing at them. "Don't touch anything." "Actually," I said, walking over and kneeling, "everything here is for touching, especially the good stuff. Go, run, be loud." The 6-year-old girl looked at me, then at her mom, then back at me. "Really? Really? In the library? There's a rolling ladder. You have my permission to use it. Just not to jump off the top. And in the theater, the popcorn machine is already on." Their eyes went wide. It was a stampede. Within 5 minutes, the house that had been a silent cathedral was filled with the sound of thundering feet, shrieks of laughter, and the distant thump of someone discovering the plush beanbag chairs in the cinema. The sound was glorious. I gave tours, or rather, the house gave its own tour. People wandered, discovering rooms, finding the gifts left for them. "Morgan," my cousin Mike said, his voice thick. He'd found the guest house, where his family had a private 3-bedroom suite. This is more than the lodge. I don't know what to say. The kids have never had their own rooms on a vacation." "Well, now they do," I said simply. "Go unpack. Get comfortable." Cade was everywhere and nowhere. I'd see him, a shadow in the corner, his lens up. He wasn't taking pictures of the house. He was taking pictures of the reactions to the house. I saw him capture the exact moment Uncle Emmett laid his eyes on the two-story library, his hand reaching out to touch the warm, polished oak of the banister. I saw him get the shot of Aunt Laurel, who had found the heated sunroom, curled up on a chaise, her face turned to the mountains, a look of absolute, unadulterated peace on her face. He was catching the dew on the grass, the steam rising from the hot tub, the surprised, sudden smiles when people found a friend they hadn't seen in years. Mr. Doyle, my old teacher, found me by the fireplace. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes were just as sharp. "Morgan Rogers," he said. He didn't look at the house. He just looked at me, and he hugged me. A strong paternal hug that I'd never gotten from my own father. He held me at arm's length. "I always knew," he said, his voice rough. "You were the one. You saw the systems behind the systems. You know, I still have it." "Still have what? Mr. Doyle?" "Your final essay, the one on applied cryptography and societal structures. I kept it. I use it as an example for my new students. This, I tell them, this is what I mean. Don't just learn the code. See the world." Tears pricked my eyes. He wasn't impressed by the house. He was proud of my mind. It was the most profound validation I had ever received. "Thank you for coming. Mr. Doyle, it means more than you know." "Are you kidding?" he scoffed. A first-class ticket to see my best student's success, I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Then, Mrs. Hartley, my old neighbor, shuffled over. She was tiny, bundled in a hand-knitted cardigan. She looked terrified and thrilled. "Oh, my dear Morgan," she said, patting my arm. It's like a palace. I feel so underdressed." "You're the best-dressed person here. Mrs. Hartley," I said. She held out a plastic bag. "It's not much. It's just, I know you like old-fashioned things." I opened it. Inside was a hand-knitted lace table runner. It was incredibly intricate, delicate, and must have taken her hundreds of hours. It was a pale cream, the color of old ivory. "It's beautiful," I whispered, genuinely moved. "Oh, it's just some thread." "No," I said. "It's perfect." I walked over to the main dining table, the one that was 40 feet long, the one set with $10,000 worth of crystal and silver, and I laid her handmade runner right down the center. It was the centerpiece, the perfect, human, imperfect heart of the whole display. I saw her watch me, her hand over her mouth, her eyes shining. People kept asking. The question was always the same, asked in a dozen different ways. "How, Morgan? You're doing okay." Then, "Was it that Aegis thing?" I found a rhythm. I avoided the numbers. The 340 million was a vulgar, useless detail. It wasn't the point. Aegis Gate was the start, I'd say. I built a good team, a really good team. I'd point to my co-founders, who were already in a heated debate with Mr. Doyle about quantum encryption. We saw a gap in the market, and we worked hard, harder than I've ever worked. We got lucky. We found the right partners, and we built something that mattered. I told the story of the work. I told them about the porch room office. I told them about Rowan's first text. I told them about the team, the journey. The money was just the anticlimactic end of the real story. And they understood. They were the people who understood work. They were the doers, the makers, the ones who showed up. By noon, the house was a symphony of warmth. I had Miles set up a station in the foyer. It was a large, beautifully bound book and a stack of simple, elegant thank you cards. "What's this?" Aunt June asked, tapping it with a finger. "That's for the staff," I said. "For Aurora and her team in the kitchen. For Miles and his team keeping us warm. For the drivers who are still out there picking people up. We're the guests. They're the ones making it happen." By 3 o'clock, the book and the card box were full of signatures, personal notes of gratitude, and I saw more than a few $20 bills tucked in. which I made Miles fish out in return. The gratitude was the point, not the cash. At 3:30, just as the sun was starting its sharp descent, casting that brilliant gold light across the valley, I saw it, a local Gallatin Valley taxi, not one of my black SUVs. It was churning up the drive. It wasn't on the list. Miles was at my elbow instantly. "Ms. Rogers, that's an unscheduled vehicle." "It's okay. Miles," I said. "I'll handle this." I walked outside, my brow furrowed. Who could this be? Was it Natalie? Had she tracked me down? The taxi stopped, the back door opened, and out stepped my grandmother. Evelyn. She was 86 years old. She was my mother's mother, a woman I hadn't seen in 2 years, a woman who was supposedly too frail to travel. She stood there, her small frame wrapped in a surprisingly stylish cashmere coat, holding a small carry-on bag. She looked up at the house, took in the scale of it, and then looked at me. A slow, delighted, incredibly wicked smile spread across her face. "Evelyn," I was floored. "What?" "How Mom said you were sick. She said you weren't feeling up to their dinner." Evelyn paid the taxi driver, adding a tip that made his eyes bug out. She turned to me. "Oh, I told Diane I was feeling poorly. I told her my hip was acting up and I was far too tired for any Thanksgiving at all." She winked. "But Ruth called me. She told me what you were doing. She told me about the classy dinner and the unclassy relatives. I took the first flight I could get." She stepped forward and grasped my hands. Her grip was like steel. "So," she said, her voice bright and clear, "are you going to let me in? Or am I too traditional for this party too?" I threw my arms around her. "You're just in time." I laughed. "Good." She patted my back. "Now, where's the bourbon? And did you really invite Emmett? I owe him $20 from our last card game." She walked into the great room, which fell silent for a moment. She was a legend. She spotted Emmett, pointed a finger at him, and boomed. "Emmett, you owe me a dance." The party had officially started. Just before Aurora's team began to bring out the food, I went to the fireplace, my grandmother at my side. I picked up a glass of champagne. I tapped the glass with a spoon. The room quieted. 44 faces turned to me, my real family, my found family, the people who had been sidelined, forgotten, or dismissed. They were all here, warm and safe, under my roof. I raised my glass. My hand was perfectly steady. "Welcome," I said, my voice clear in the warm, bright room. "I'm not going to make a speech. I just want to say one thing." I looked around the room, meeting every eye. Emmett, Laurel, June, Mr. Doyle, Mrs. Hartley, my co-founders, my grandmother. Thank you for being here. There are a lot of tables in the world today. I'm just so damn glad you're at this one. I raised my glass higher. To the ones who showed up. The moment my toast ended, the room erupted, not with polite applause, but with a roar. It was the sound of 45 people letting go of a tension they didn't know they were holding, and as if summoned by the sound, Aurora Vale's team swept through the doors. It was a performance of breathtaking competence. They moved in unison, a silent, disciplined unit. The food didn't just arrive, it was presented. The 2 long tables, already groaning with glassware, and the centerpiece of Mrs. Hartley's lace, were suddenly overwhelmed with abundance. This was not my mother's classy meal. This was a feast. There was the smoked turkey, its skin a dark, lacquered mahogany. There was the deep-fried turkey, impossibly crisp, and the classic roasted bird, glistening with black truffle butter. There was the prime rib, a massive, perfectly pink cut of beef. There was the cedar plank salmon that flaked at the mere suggestion of a fork. And the sides, my God, the sides. They placed Aurora's masterpiece of a green bean casserole, bubbling with Gruyere, right next to Aunt Laurel's classic foil pan dish. No one judged, no one compared. Both were devoured. There were mountains of brown butter mashed potatoes, bowls of chorizo cornbread stuffing, Roasted root vegetables with a balsamic glaze, vats of macaroni and cheese so rich it was almost obscene. It was defiant. It was overwhelming. It was too much, and it was exactly right. For a long time, the only sound was the clatter of heavy silver on porcelain and deep, appreciative murmurs. The kids, who had been given their own wing of the table, were mercifully quiet, their faces maps of gravy. Then, Uncle Emmett pushed his chair back. He stood up, his face flushed with wine and warmth. He banged his fork against a crystal water glass. The room quieted. "I'm not," he said, his voice thick, "a speech guy. You all know that. I'm the loud one, the one who tells the bad jokes." A few people chuckled. "But I got to say something. We're all supposed to say what we're grateful for." He looked down the long table, at all the faces, all the people who had been deemed too much or not enough by my mother. "I'm grateful," he said, his voice cracking, "for a chance to be here with no conditions. I'm grateful for an invitation that didn't come with a set of rules. I'm grateful for a table where you don't have to be classy to get a seat." He raised his glass, not to me, but to everyone. "I'm grateful for a family, a real one, the one that shows up, the one that doesn't care about the truck you drive." He looked at me, his eyes wet. "Thank you, Morgie, for all of this, for seeing us." He sat, and a wave of applause, softer this time, filled the room, before it could die. Mr. Doyle stood. He was a teacher. He knew how to hold a room. "I'll second that, Emmett," he said, his voice clear. "We're all here for a reason, and I think I know what it is. I'm grateful for something very specific." He looked right at me. "I'm grateful for the kid who doesn't wait for permission. I'm grateful for the mind that sees a problem and just builds the solution, while everyone else is busy trying to impress the neighbors. I'm grateful for the person who is busy building the future." He nodded at my co-founders. "You did good, Morgan. You always did. I'm grateful I got to see it." He sat down, and the silence that followed was heavy, profound. Then, Evelyn, my grandmother. She stood slowly, aided by my cousin Mike. She was frail, but her presence filled the room. She held a wine glass, her hand, covered in liver spots and rings, surprisingly steady. "Well," she said, her voice dry and crisp, "you two took the good ones." The room laughed. "I'm 86 years old. I've been to a lot of Thanksgivings. I've seen families tear each other apart for pride, for money, for appearances." Her eyes swept the room, and she seemed to look at every single person who had been cut from Diane's list. "We are all here because, in one way or another, we were told no. We were told we weren't the right fit. We were told the road was closed." She turned, slowly, and looked directly at me. Her gaze was as sharp and clear as the glass in my hand. "I am grateful," she said, her voice ringing with a sudden, fierce power, "for the people who, when they find the old road closed and barred, don't sit in the dirt and weep. I am grateful for the ones who pick up a shovel, draw a new map, and build their own damned highway." She raised her glass high. "To the builders, to Morgan." The room was on its feet. The applause was thunder. It was a wave of pure, unfiltered love and validation. I stood, my face burning, and raised my glass back, and as the applause began to fade, as people sat down, wiping their eyes, the two massive television screens on the far wall, which had been displaying a crackling fireplace, went dark, and then they lit up. It was Cade. He was at the back of the room, at a control panel. The first photo appeared. It wasn't of the house. It was a tight close-up of Uncle Emmett, taken an hour ago, when he'd seen the fly rod. His mouth was open in disbelief, his eyes wide, his hand held over his heart. It was a portrait of pure, unadulterated shock and joy. The photo dissolved. The next one, Mr. Doyle, in the library. His back to the camera. He was standing on the rolling ladder, his hand reaching for a book on the top shelf. He looked 20 years younger, The next, the cousins' kids, all three of them. They were outside, their coats discarded, their faces and hands absolutely covered in mud from the edge of the stream. The 6-year-old girl was mid-laugh, her head thrown back, a streak of dirt on her forehead. It was the face of perfect, shush-free freedom, photo after photo. Mrs. Hartley, asleep in the sunroom, her knitting in her lap, a peaceful, unguarded smile on her face. Aunt Laurel and Aurora, side by side in the kitchen, laughing as Laurel explained her casserole. My grandmother, Evelyn, cheating at a card game with my co-founders. They were raw. They were candid. They were beautiful. Cade was showing us ourselves, not opposed, stiff. Look at the camera version. He was showing us our joy, our relief, our peace. There was no comparison. There was no performance. It was just us. The room was silent, watching this gallery of their own happiness. Then, the buzzing started. It was quiet at first, a phone vibrating on the table, then another, and another. The younger engineers from Red Mesa, the cousins, they were all picking up their phones. My cousin Sarah leaned over, her eyes wide, holding her screen out to me. "Morgan, look." The posts were flooding in. Cade had been sending his best shots to the cloud, and my guests had been grabbing them. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. It was the photos, the kids covered in mud, the shot of the 2 endless, overflowing tables, the close-up of my grandmother raising her glass. The captions were the real bomb. This is what Thanksgiving is supposed to feel: classy dinner. Family isn't about who you cut, it's about who you welcome. Grateful for Gallatin Ridge. My boss flew 40 of us home for the holiday. This is my work family, and it's real. Aunt Morgan's house. No filter needed. Family chooses love over status. Always. The wave was building. These posts were being shared, liked, commented on. The unclassy relatives, the clutter, were broadcasting their joy to the entire world. I looked at the glowing screen. I looked at the happy, loud, messy room. I smiled. I didn't need to say a word. I didn't need to add a single comment. The story was being told, and I wasn't the one telling it. In the middle of this rising, happy chaos, Miles appeared at my elbow. He leaned in, his voice low and professional, but I caught the tinge of alarm. "Ms. Rogers, apologies. There is an unauthorized vehicle at the property line." My blood went cold. The wine in my glass suddenly tasted like acid. They were here. Natalie, Diane, Robert. They had seen the posts. They had come. My boundary, my polite wall of hospitality, was about to be breached. I kept my voice perfectly level. "Who is it?" "Miles." "The reception team doesn't recognize the car. It's a blue sedan. They are not on the list. And they are asking for you, by name." I took a breath. I pictured them, angry, humiliated, demanding entry, ready to make a scene. "Get the driver's name, Miles, and the plate." He nodded, tapping his tablet. He listened to his earpiece. One moment, the entire room was still oblivious, laughing, sharing photos. Only Evelyn, my grandmother, was watching me. She knew. Miles looked up from his tablet, his face relaxing into mild confusion. "My apologies, Ms. Rogers. False alarm." "What?" "It's a driver from the lodge at Timberline. It's not one of our shuttles. It's his personal car. He brought Mrs. Hartley's medication. She left it in her room. He was just trying to make sure it got to her." The cold knot in my stomach dissolved instantly. It wasn't an invasion. It was just kindness. "Thank you, Miles," I said, my voice warm again. "Please, send him in. He's eating with us. Tell Aurora to set another place." "Right away, Ms. Rogers." He vanished. The boundary had held. The wall had not been tested. Not yet. I turned back to the table, the adrenaline slowly fading. My cousin Sarah leaned in again, The social media buzz was dying down. Her voice was a conspiratorial whisper. "Morgan, this is wild. My mom just texted me." "Is she okay?" "She's fine. She drove past Natalie's house on her way home." I froze. "Oh, yeah." She said, "Morgan." She said it was weird. Weird how. She said it was silent. All the lights were on, but just two cars in the driveway, Grant's and another one, his parents' Mercedes. Probably. She said the house just looked cold and empty, all that space, and just nothing. She stared at me, waiting for my reaction. This was it, the moment of victory, the moment I could have gloated, or smiled, or said, "Good, they deserve it." I looked at my cousin. I saw the gossip in her eyes, the hunger for my reaction. I gave her nothing. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just held her gaze. I picked up my fork, took a bite of the 5-cheese potato gratin. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. I let the silence be my answer. The boundary was my silence. "Well," Sarah said, finally looking away. "Their loss." As if on cue, the kitchen doors swung open again, the lights in the great room dimmed slightly, and a new smell filled the air. Toasted sugar, vanilla, spiced nuts, Aurora Vale herself, her white apron exchanged for a clean black one, led the procession. Dessert, 10 different pies, a towering pecan pie, sticky and dense, a Dutch apple crumble, its topping thick and buttery, a classic pumpkin, shimmering with spice, a rich, dark chocolate bourbon tart. They set them down. They brought out bowls of handmade vanilla bean ice cream. The room exploded again, this time in a unified groan of pleasure. The tension was gone. The whispers were over. There was only the sound of spoons, of laughter, of 45 people, full and warm and seen, arguing over who got the last slice of pecan. It was late, almost midnight. The house had finally settled. The last of the Aegis Gate engineers had been shuttled back to the lodge at Timberline. The cousins and their exhausted, muddy, deliriously happy children were asleep in the guest house. Mr. Doyle and Uncle Emmett were in the library, lost in a quiet, bourbon-fueled debate over a chess game. Mrs. Hartley had been asleep for hours. The great room was quiet, lit only by the embers in the massive fireplace. Aurora's team had scrubbed the kitchen into silence and vanished. I was in my office, the door closed, the house was full. But I was, for the first time, truly alone. I had done it. I had built the table. I had fed the forgotten. I had given them a day of unconditional warmth. My phone was on the desk. It had been off, fully powered down, for almost 36 hours. My hand was steady as I picked it up. I held the side button. The screen glowed. First black, then the white logo. Then it came to life. It was not a vibration. It was a seizure. The phone began to buzz, a high, frantic, angry sound. It skittered across the oak desk, propelled by the force of the incoming notifications. I watched it, dispassionately, as it vibrated itself in a tight circle. 37 missed calls, 112 text messages. I let it finish its tantrum. When the buzzing finally subsided, the screen was a solid wall of red badges. I opened the texts, a cascade of blue and green, from Natalie, from Diane, from Robert, from Diane again, from Natalie, the early ones, from last night. "Morgan, where are you? Call me, the ones from this morning. Your phone is off, turn it on. Call me, the ones from this afternoon." As the first photos hit, "What is this? Who are all those people? Ruth is posting pictures of some house. Call your mother now." Then, the most recent ones, the ones that had come in after the wave of social media joy, after the captions from my guests had landed. The last text was from Natalie. It had arrived just 20 minutes ago. I tapped it. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an accusation. It was a cold, stunned assessment. "The pictures are beautiful. I had no idea you were this rich. I read the words twice. Rich, not happy, not congratulations, just rich. She had seen the house, the food, the guests, and she had translated it all into the only language she understood. It was the final, perfect confirmation. As I stared at her text, the phone rang. The screen lit up Diane. I let it ring. The sound cutting through the silence of my office. 1 ring, 2. I took a slow breath. I was not the girl at table 19. I was not the one scrubbing pans. I was the CEO of Aegisgate. This was just another negotiation. I pressed accept. I did not speak. I just held the phone to my ear, listening to the dead air. Morgan. Her voice was high, tight, a violin string stretched to its breaking point. Morgan, are you there? Hello, Mother? My voice was calm, low, and cold, a sound, half gasp, half sob. Morgan, what have you done? The question was accusatory, as if I had committed a crime. What do you mean, Diane? The pictures, the house, everyone is. My phone is blowing up. Ruth Emmett. They're all posting. You did this to embarrass me. I leaned back in my chair. I looked out the dark window at the reflection of my own office. I'm embarrassing you by hosting Thanksgiving. You lied, she shrieked. You let us, and Evelyn is my mother there. Is she? She told me she was sick. She told me she was too frail to come to my dinner. She's here, I said. She seems fine. She beat Emmett at cards. How could you? She whispered, the rage suddenly replaced by a sharp, venomous pity. How could you do that to your own mother? You held a competing party. You did it on purpose, to humiliate us. I held Thanksgiving for the people you excluded, I said, my voice cutting through her performance. The ones who weren't classy enough for your table, the ones you cut to impress Grant's parents. There was a sudden, sharp silence on the line. The word excluded hung in the air. I heard a muffled sound, my father's voice. What is she saying? What's that about Grant? Diane's voice, away from the phone. She says she knows about the list. Give me the phone, Robert commanded. The sound of a scuffle, then his voice, the CEO voice, the one that had dismissed my hobby. Morgan, what is this nonsense? Your mother is hysterical. She called me, I said simply. Where did you get that house? What is this? Are you in debt? Did you borrow money for this? This performance. The hope in his voice was palpable. The hope that I was a fraud. No, Dad, I'm not in debt. Then where did you get it? Where did you get the money to fly half the family to Montana? Where did the money come from? It's my money. What money? He demanded. I sold my company, Aegisgate. Last year. Silence. A heavy, dead, static silence. The kind of silence I remembered from when I showed him my photo sorting software. Sold it, he finally said. His voice was flat. What? What company? You mean Northwood? No, Dad, I said. The old, familiar exhaustion washing over me. Aegisgate, the company I built, the one I started on my porch, the hobby. Another pause. He was processing. He was calculating. How much? It was not a question. It was a command, a demand for the data. That's not really your business. Do not play games with me. Morgan, your mother is having a breakdown. You've made a public spectacle of this family. How much? He was yelling now. He had lost control. I had not. I let the silence stretch for 5 full seconds. $340 million, I said. I said it clearly, quietly, factually. The silence that followed was different. It was not anger. It was not confusion. It was absolute, profound shock. It was the sound of a worldview shattering. I heard a fumbling sound. I heard him cover the receiver, but he was clumsy. He was shaken. I heard his voice, a strangled, choked whisper. To my mother. 340 Million. My God. Diane. 340 million. I heard her make a small, sick sound. He came back on the line. The shock was gone. In its place was a new, boiling rage. The rage of a man who had just realized he had fundamentally, catastrophically, misjudged the board. So that's it, he spat. That's what. This all of it, this circus, the house, the charter jet, dragging my family and your grandmother across the country. It was a performance, a show. No, I said. Don't you lie to me, he roared. You did this to teach us a lesson. You did this to humiliate us, to rub our noses in it. You've been planning this, haven't you? Sitting on your money, just waiting for the chance to make us look small. This party was not about you, I said, my voice still level, still cold. It was about them. It's disgusting, he shouted. All this showing off. We are a private family, you have no class. Morgan, no class at all. Class. The word hit me. The word that had started this all. Dad, my voice was sharp, and it cut through his tirade. He stopped. I am not showing off. I'm just not hiding anymore. For 10 years. You were never interested. You didn't ask. You didn't care. So I stopped talking. I built my company in silence. I sold it in silence. This isn't a show. This is just my life. The one you never, ever bothered to look at. There was a soft knock on the office door. It opened, and my grandmother, Evelyn, stood there. She was in her silk pajamas, holding 2 glasses. One had a healthy amount of bourbon in it. She saw my face, saw the phone clutched in my hand. She didn't need an explanation. She quietly shut the door, walked to the desk, and looked at me. I didn't look away from the dark window. I just reached out my free hand and pressed the speaker button on the console. Robert's voice, tinny and furious, instantly filled the quiet room. Absolutely ashamed of this behavior, Morgan. And your mother is devastated. We were trying to have a nice, quiet, classy. Diane's voice broke in, a hysterical wail. We just wanted a nice dinner for Grant's parents. And you ruined it. Everyone saw, everyone knows Evelyn lied to me. You turned my own mother against me. Evelyn walked up to the desk. She set the 2 glasses down. The click of the glass on the wood, sharp and loud. She leaned into the phone. Her voice was clear, cold, and amplified by the microphone. Oh, for God's sake, Diane, stop whining. The phone went dead silent. Mom, Diane whispered. I'm here, Evelyn said. I'm listening to this ridiculous, self-pitying nonsense. You're not devastated. You're embarrassed. You got caught. Mom, you don't understand, Diane stammered. It was for appearances. I understand perfectly, Evelyn snapped, her voice like ice. If you're jealous, just say you're jealous. Don't call it keeping it small for appearances. You made your choice. You chose classy over family. You chose Grant's parents over your own blood. And look what family did. She tapped a finger on my desk. She built her own table. More silence. Thick, heavy, choking. I could hear Diane start to cry. But it was a different sound now. It wasn't rage. It was the small, ugly, gulping sound of shame. Robert's voice came back. Quiet, defeated. Evelyn. Robert, she replied. Her tone final. There was nothing left to say. The truth was out. The numbers were out. The motives were out. There was no apology. There was no request for money. There was just the cold, hard fact of what they had done, and what I had done in response. There was a quiet click. They had hung up. The speakerphone hissed with the deadline. I reached out and pressed the button, cutting the sound. The office was silent. When a child, I dreamed of a family that saw me. I dreamed of a table where I belonged. I dreamed of a home where I was not the designated help, the afterthought, the quiet, inconvenient daughter who was too smart in the wrong ways. I dreamed of a world where I was not constantly, painfully, compared to Natalie. My name is Morgan Rogers. I am 32 years old, and last night, I finally stopped dreaming. I live in a glass apartment in Port Azure, where the Pacific Ocean tries to smash the cliffs into dust. I also live in Gallatin Ridge, Montana, in a house made of timber and stone, where the silence is so total it feels like a presence. I built a company. I sold it. I made a life for myself in the quiet, logical world of code, a world where effort and elegance were rewarded, a world my family never bothered to understand. They were too busy admiring Natalie. And I was, for a long time, too busy trying to earn my place at their table. Until yesterday. Yesterday, I got the text message that finally, set me free. It was from my mother, Diane. I was standing in the kitchen of my $6 million Gallatin Ridge home, a house my family did not know existed. I was arranging flowers, imagining the moment I would finally invite them here, the moment the sheer, undeniable fact of my success would force them to see me. That was when my phone lit up. This year our Thanksgiving is small, just Natalie, Grant, and the kids. Just small this year. Just Natalie, her husband, and their children. I stared at the words. I wasn't just uninvited. I was erased. I was not part of the small circle. I was the other. The exclusion was so casual, so clean. My thumbs typed, "Have fun," before I could even think. I put the phone down on the cold granite. The sound of the glass on the stone was a sharp, final click. In the stillness of that massive, empty room, the Pacific wind howled outside the windows. It was a familiar cut. My entire life was a collection of them. These tiny, sharp incisions, all delivered by the people who were supposed to be my protectors. Natalie was the golden one. She was the prom queen, the cheer captain, the one with the perfect grades and the effortless charm. I was the shadow dweller, the girl who lived in libraries and spoke in algorithms. I remember winning the state algorithm prize. I was 16. I had spent months on it. I brought home the trophy. My father, Robert, glanced up from his newspaper and grunted, "Good job, kid." Then he turned to my mother, Diane. "Did Natalie decide on her prom dress yet?" I put the trophy in my closet. I taught myself Python. I built a program to organize the thousands of scattered digital photos our family had. I presented it, my heart pounding, hoping this would be the thing. This, they would understand. Robert said, squinting at the screen. "Tidy. So, about Natalie's dance. I got into Harrison Tech, the best engineering school in the country." Their reaction was muted. "Oh," my mother said, "that computer school. Well, that's practical, I suppose." My first year there was a black hole of loneliness. I was starving for a word of encouragement. A single, "We're proud of you." What I got were phone calls filled with Natalie's wedding plans. Ah, the wedding. A lavish, sprawling affair. I was a bridesmaid, stuffed into a dress I hated, and I found my place card at the reception. Table 19, in the back, by the swinging doors to the kitchen, while my family, the real family, toasted each other at the head table. I sat with the catering overflow. I ended up in the kitchen, helping the staff clear plates. It felt more honest. From then on, that was my role. Thanksgiving, I was the dishwasher. Christmas, I was the one clearing plates, scrubbing the roasting pan while the sound of laughter drifted in from the living room. I was the help. My parents, who never once visited me at Harrison Tech. "It's such a long flight, dear." Found the time to take multiple vacations with Natalie and Grant. Tuscany, Aspen, a Disney cruise. They're smiling. Perfect faces filled my Facebook feed. I made a promise to myself, my hands deep in greasy water. One day, another table. I put the phone down. It buzzed again. A second text from Diane. "Hope you understand." I looked at the words, and I did. I understood everything. My eyes grew cold. The game was over. After Harrison, I did what they wanted. I got a practical job at Northwood Labs. It was stable. It was boring. I hated it. I lasted 22 months. I quit. I took my tiny 401k and I jumped. My first startup was a disaster, a travel security app. It burned through my savings and left me with negative $200 in my bank account and a mountain of credit card debt. I was 30. I was living in a damp room on a converted porch. My desk a $5 door laid over 2 filing cabinets. I was desperate. I needed a bridge loan. Just a little runway. $20,000. I swallowed my pride. I called home. Robert listened. I heard him cover the phone, his voice a muffled scoff. Business venture. Diane came on the line, her voice dripping with pity. Honey, we just want you to be realistic. Look at Natalie. She works in finance. She has a plan. Why can't you be practical, like your sister? Robert cut in. We are not, he said, his voice hard as iron. Financing your hobby. He hung up. I sat in the silence, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. Hobby. That was the last time I ever asked them for anything. That rejection was a gift. It burned away the last toxic scrap of hope I had for their approval. I went to war. I lived on instant ramen. I worked 16-hour days. I slept at my desk, waking up with the imprint of the keyboard on my cheek. I was 3 months in, almost at the end, when I saw the flaw. I wasn't selling a product. I was selling a philosophy. I deleted 90 days of work. I started over. I rebuilt the architecture from scratch. I abandoned the consumer market and pivoted to a zero-trust security model for medium-sized businesses. I called it Aegisgate. I found a vulnerability in a local bank's test server. I didn't ask permission. I fixed it. Then I sent their CTO an email. Subject: I just patched the zero-day exploit you don't know you have. He hired me. The first contract was for $50,000. My phone buzzed. A text from Rowan, an old colleague from Northwood, the only one who believed in me. Heard you just poached Gallatin Valley Bank. Knew you could do it. I cried on the street corner, and I learned my new lesson. I didn't tell my family. I never told them anything again. I would just work. I would work until I could not be ignored. That night, on my monitor, the first green bar appeared on my revenue dashboard. The siege had begun. Aegisgate grew. We went from my porch to a windowless office to a glass tower in Port Azure. We opened a second hub in Red Mesa. We hired 120 people. We landed a federal contract, protecting the power grid. We landed a national retail chain. Then Orion Apex Group called. The negotiations took 5 months. They wanted to buy my code and bury my team. I said no. I demanded my entire staff be retained. Their salaries guaranteed for 3 years. I demanded the code remain under my architect's protection. They fought. They postured. They threatened. I waited. I had what they needed. They agreed to every term. I signed the contract. My hand didn't shake. The final sale price. $340 million. That night, I went back to my apartment. I closed the door. I looked at the city lights, and I cried. Just for a minute. For the girl at the sink. For the girl with the keyboard marks on her face. Then I washed my face. I didn't tell my family. I went to Montana. I bought the 50-acre estate in Gallatin Ridge, the $6 million house of glass and stone. I hired Miles, my property manager. I tore out the kitchen and built a chef's dream. I carved trails through the pines. I stocked the lake with trout. I built a sanctuary, and I imagined Thanksgiving. I imagined them arriving, their faces pale with shock. I imagined my father, speechless. I imagined my mother, stunned. I imagined, finally, the apology, the recognition. I was standing in that kitchen, the fantasy fresh in my mind, when my mother's text arrived. This year, our Thanksgiving is small. The dream shattered. The patience snapped. I was not angry. I was done. I looked at the empty, perfect house. I opened my contacts. I scrolled past Diane and Robert. I called my Uncle Emmett. Emmett, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? Nothing, kid, he boomed. Got the boot. Diane's keeping it intimate this year. Just Natalie and her perfect family. Good, I said. Change of plans. How do you feel about Montana? Pause. Montana. I have a new place. Lots of seats at the table. I'm sending a car. First-class ticket will be in your email in 5 minutes. Pack a warm coat. I hung up. I called Aunt Laurel, the one whose casserole Natalie always mocked. Cut. I called Great Aunt June, the one my mother found too nosy. Cut. I called my cousins with the loud, happy kids that Grant couldn't stand. Cut. I made 19 calls, 18 people, all family, all cut. The last call was to Aunt Ruth. She had the truth. "Oh, honey," she whispered. "It's awful. Diane's terrified. Grant's parents are coming, and she wants the table to look classy and sophisticated. She only invited the successful part of the family." Successful. I sent a group text to the 18 people I'd just invited. "My mother is having a classy Thanksgiving. I'm having a better one. My table will be big enough for all of us." I wasn't done. I called Mr. Doyle, my high school computer science teacher. "Mr. Doyle, this is Morgan Rogers. I'm flying you to Montana. Because you were the first person who ever saw me, I called Mrs. Hartley, my old neighbor who used to leave me soup. I called my 2 Aegis Gate co-founders. I sent a blast message to my 40 engineers in Red Mesa. Anyone without a place to go, I've chartered a plane. This week, you're home with me." I called Miles. "We're expecting 45 guests. Book the lodge at Timberline for the overflow. I need shuttles, black SUVs, continuous airport transfers. And Miles, I'm hiring Chef Aurora Vale, double her fee, unlimited budget, and get Cade, the photojournalist. I want this documented. No poses, just the truth. One last thing. Gifts, personalized." I sent him the list. A top-of-the-line fly rod for Emmett, a rare first-edition book for June, art kits and astronomy sets for the kids. At the bottom, I wrote, "Nothing violent. This is a sanctuary." Miles nodded, a small smile on his face. "This is quite the party, Ms. Rogers." "It's not a party, Miles," I said. "It's a statement." The calls started the next day. The gossip network was on fire. My phone rang. "Natalie." "Morgan?" Her voice was falsely sweet. "Just checking in. What are you doing for Thanksgiving since Mom's thing is so small?" She was calling to gloat, to confirm I was alone. "I have plans," I said. "Oh, friends?" "No," I said. "Family." The silence on the line was a vacuum. "Family," she finally said, her voice sharp. "What family?" I let her wait. "The ones who want to be there. Natalie." I hung up. I put my phone on airplane mode. A digital door slammed shut. Miles asked if I wanted a security gate. "No," I said. "This is a home, not a fortress. Hospitality is the boundary. Everyone on the list belongs here. Anyone else is a visitor. And we aren't accepting visitors. Politely, but firmly." Aurora Vale arrived. She looked like a tactical commander. Her menu was an act of defiant abundance. 3 turkeys, 1 smoked, 1 deep-fried, 1 roasted with black truffle, prime rib, salmon, 10 different pies. Aunt Laurel's casserole was on the prep list, right next to Aurora's own gourmet version. Cade arrived. "The story is arrival," he said. "No posing. Posed photos are for people trying to prove something. We're just capturing the truth." I went to the great room, 2 long, parallel oak tables, 45 chairs, no head of the table, no children's table. This was the answer to table 19. I wrote a note to myself and pinned it to my desk. No need to prove, just enjoy. I would not be the star. I would not make a speech. My gift was the absence of obligation. I powered my phone off. They had put me on silent for 32 years. They could wait. Outside, the sky over Gallatin Ridge turned a deep, violet blue. The first shuttles were scheduled for 6 a.m. I was awake at 6. The house smelled of browning butter and roasting spices. Aurora's team was in silent, efficient command. At 8:03, the first SUV arrived. Uncle Emmett stepped out. He looked at the facade of glass and stone. his mouth open. "Morgie," he whispered, "I thought you had a new place. This, this ain't a place. This is a national park." I hugged him. "The fly rod is in your room. Uncle Emmett." The arrivals were a steady stream. Aunt Laurel arrived, crying, clutching her casserole. "Aurora is saving a spot in the oven for it," I said. By 10 a.m., the house was full. The engineers from Red Mesa, the cousins, the kids stood paralyzed in the entryway, their parents hissing. "Don't touch anything," I knelt. "Actually, everything here is for touching. Go, run, be loud. The popcorn machine in the theater is already on." It was a stampede. The silent cathedral was filled with shrieks of laughter. Cade was a shadow, capturing the moments. Emmett's face when he saw the 2-story library, Aunt Laurel, asleep in the sunroom, a look of pure peace on her face. Mr. Doyle found me. He hugged me, a real hug, the kind my father never gave. "I always knew," he said, his voice rough. "I still have your final essay. Morgan, the one on cryptography. I show it to my students. Mrs. Hartley, my old neighbor, gave me a gift, a hand-knitted lace table runner. It was intricate, beautiful. I took it and laid it down the center of the main table, the perfect human heart of the crystal and silver. When people asked how, I told them the truth. I told them about the porch room office. I told them about the work. I never mentioned the number. At 3:30, a local taxi crunched up the drive. Not on my list. Miles was at my elbow. Unauthorized. I went to the door. My grandmother, Evelyn, stepped out, 86 years old, in a cashmere coat, looking delighted. "Evelyn, Mom said you were sick." "Oh, I told Diane I was feeling poorly," she said, her smile wicked. "Ruth called me, told me about the classy dinner and the unclassy relatives. I took the first flight." She grasped my hands. "So, are you going to let me in? Or am I too traditional for this party? Too—" I laughed and hugged her. "You're just in time." "Good," she boomed, walking inside. "Now, where's the bourbon?" I tapped a glass with a spoon. The room quieted. 44 faces, my real family, turned to me. "Welcome," I said. "I'm just so damn glad you're at this one." To the ones who showed up, the room roared. Aurora's team swept in. The tables groaned with the food. It was overwhelming. It was too much. It was perfect. Emmett stood, his glass raised. "I'm grateful," he said, his voice cracking, "for a chance to be here with no conditions. I'm grateful for a table where you don't have to be classy to get a seat." Mr. Doyle stood. "I'm grateful for the kid who doesn't wait for permission. I'm grateful for the one who builds the future while everyone else is busy trying to impress the neighbors." Finally, Evelyn, she stood, frail and strong. "I am grateful," she said, her voice ringing, "for the people who, when they find the old road closed, don't sit and weep. I am grateful for the ones who pick up a shovel and build their own damned highway. To the builders, to Morgan." The room was on its feet, the applause like thunder. Then, the screens in the room lit up. It was Cade. He showed us Emmett's face when he saw the fly rod. Pure joy. He showed us the kids, covered in mud, laughing, their heads thrown back. Pure freedom. He showed us Mrs. Hartley, asleep, smiling. Pure peace. He was showing us our own happiness. Then, the phones started buzzing. The guests, they were posting Cade's photos. Instagram, Facebook. The captions were the bomb. "Family chooses love over status, always." This is what Thanksgiving is supposed to feel like. Grateful for Gallatin Ridge. My boss flew 40 of us home for the holiday. This is my work family, and it's real. I smiled. The story was being told. Miles appeared at my elbow, his voice tense. "Ms. Rogers, unauthorized vehicle at the property line." My blood went cold. They were here. Who is it? Miles. A blue sedan. Not on the list. They're asking for you. I braced for the confrontation. Miles listened to his earpiece. Apologies. False alarm. It's a driver from the lodge. He's bringing Mrs. Hartley's medication. She left it in her room. It wasn't an invasion. It was just kindness. Send him in. Miles, I said. He's eating with us. My cousin Sarah leaned in, her phone glowing. My mom just texted. She drove past Natalie's house. She said it was silent, just 2 cars. She said it looked cold and empty. I looked at her. I felt the surge of victory. I said nothing. I just took a bite of potato gratin. My silence was the boundary. The kitchen doors swung open. Dessert, 10 pies, ice cream. The room groaned in pleasure. It was midnight. The house was quiet. I was in my office. I turned my phone on. It seized. It skittered across the desk. 37 missed calls. 112 texts. All from them. The last text was from Natalie. The pictures are beautiful. I had no idea you were this rich. The phone rang. Diane. I answered. Hello, Mother. Morgan. What have you done? She shrieked. You've embarrassed me. Evelyn is there. She lied to me. You did this to humiliate me. I held Thanksgiving for the people you excluded. Mom, the ones who weren't classy enough for your table. Silence. Then Robert. Give me the phone. Morgan, where did you get this money? Are you in debt? No, Dad. I'm not in debt. Then where? I sold my company last year. Aegis Gate. Sold it? What company you mean? Northwood. No, Dad. The hobby. How much? It was a demand. $340 million. Dead. Silence. Then, I heard him. The phone was badly covered. A choked, strangled whisper to my mother. 340 million. He came back on the line, his voice shaking with rage. So that's it. This circus, this performance. You did this to teach us a lesson, to rub our noses in it. I'm not showing off, Dad, I said, my voice cold and clear. I'm just not hiding anymore. You were never interested, so I stopped talking. This isn't a show. This is just my life, the one you never bothered to look at. The door opened. Evelyn, she was in her pajamas, holding 2 glasses of bourbon. She saw my face. She understood. I pressed the speaker button. Diane's wail filled the room. We just wanted a nice, classy dinner for Grant's parents. And you ruined it. Evelyn leaned into the phone. Oh, for God's sake, Diane, stop whining. Silence. Mom. I'm here, Evelyn snapped. You're not devastated. You're embarrassed. You got caught. If you're jealous, just say you're jealous. Don't call it keeping it small for appearances. You chose classy over family. And look what family did. She built her own table. More silence. Ugly. Choking. Then a click. They hung up. The speakerphone hissed. I turned it off. Evelyn pushed a bourbon glass across the desk. From down the hall, I heard the faint sound of Mr. Doyle trying to play the piano. I picked up the glass. The silence from my phone felt like a victory. The text started the next morning, from Natalie. I've been jealous of you for a long time. I did the things they told me to. I followed their path. I'm sorry. I stared at the words. It was the first honest thing she had ever said to me. I typed. I deleted. I finally just wrote, "Thank you for saying that." From Diane. Your grandmother is right. I was wrong. The house is beautiful. From Robert. A separate text. I am proud of you. I felt nothing. A cold, quiet emptiness. It was too late. The words were meaningless now. Then, the real text. From Diane. Could we come see Gallatin Ridge sometime after the holiday? Just the small family? I saw the trap. They didn't want me. They wanted the house. They wanted the money. I sat with Evelyn on the terrace, the snow-capped mountains sharp against the blue sky. "They want to come," I said. "Of course they do," she said, sipping her coffee. "Now the classy party is here. But if you let them in, you set the rules. No ambiguity." I made my decision. I texted back. "One night, a simple dinner, no gifts, no comparisons. We will not discuss money." I called Miles. "Prepare the main house for 3 guests. Minimal staff, no photographer, no expensive wine." I went to my desk. I opened a drawer. I took out a small digital audio recorder. I copied the audio file of my mother's first voicemail, the one where she told Ruth she wanted to impress Grant's parents and keep the table classy, onto my laptop. I put it on the desktop, just in case. Just in case they tried to rewrite the story. This was not forgiveness. This was a boundary, drawn in steel. They arrived the next evening. Robert, Diane, Natalie. They drove up in their Mercedes. They stood in the great room, their faces pale, their eyes darting everywhere. They were trying to calculate the cost of the beams, the stone, the 30-foot wall of glass. I watched them. I felt no triumph. I felt only a profound, cold distance. We sat for the meal. It was simple, just as I'd planned. Soup, roasted fish, a salad. The silence was heavy. "Morgan," Robert began, clearing his throat, that old familiar sound. "This place, I just want to say," I held up my hand. "Before we start," I said, "we're here for 2 things, truth and boundaries, not revisions." Natalie looked down. Diane's hands were trembling. What does that mean?" Diane asked. "It means we start with the truth." I tapped the spacebar on my laptop, which was sitting on the sideboard. I had it connected to the house speakers. My mother's voice, bright and conspiratorial, filled the silent, cavernous room. "Just to impress Grant's parents. I want the table to look classy and sophisticated this year." Diane's face went white. She made a small, strangled sound. Natalie closed her eyes. Robert just stared at his plate. The audio file finished. The silence rushed back in. I'm so ashamed," Diane whispered. She was crying. Real tears this time. Natalie reached over and, for the first time I'd ever seen, took her mother's hand. I looked at them, and then I looked past them. The great room was not empty. I had asked them all to stay. Evelyn, Emmett, Laurel, Mr. Doyle, Mrs. Hartley, my cousins. They were all there, standing in the shadows by the fireplace, sitting on the stairs. They had been invited back, to listen, to be seen. I stood up. I picked up my water glass. "I don't need an apology," I said, my voice clear and strong. "And I don't need your approval. I never did. I just need respect. In this house, at my table. No one is judged. No one is scored or graded to see if they are classy enough to be here." I walked to the window. "You are welcome here," I said, "to my parents, to my sister. But the price of admission is that you respect everyone else in this room, every single person you cut from your list." I turned to my real family, to Emmett and Laurel, to Mr. Doyle and Evelyn. "And my table," I said. "We'll always have a seat for them." I motioned to Miles. He pulled a cord. A curtain dropped from a recess in the ceiling. It was a massive, empty panel. No, not empty. Engraved in the dark wood, in simple, elegant script, were their names: Emmett, Laurel, June, Ruth, Michael, Sarah, Doyle, Hartley, all of them. "Their names are part of this house now," I said. "They are a permanent part of my table. They are here for every Thanksgiving to come. If you walk through that door, you honor them. You honor all of them. If you cannot, the door will close. Those are the rules." Aurora's team, on cue, tapped a small bell. Dessert was coming. Cade, whom I had invited back for just this moment, stepped out from the shadows. He raised his camera. Evelyn, Emmett, and Mr. Doyle raised their glasses. toasting me, Natalie and my parents. They just sat there, frozen, and as Cade's flash fired, I looked at all of them. I smiled. I walked over to my phone, which was on the table. I picked it up. I turned it over. Screen down. The glass back was dark, reflecting the warm lights of the great room, my table, my rules. The screen was black. I didn't need to check it. I didn't care who was calling. The silence was absolute. The game was over. I had won. The house was quiet the next morning. After the storm of the previous night, the explosive phone call, the accusations, Evelyn's final, devastating shutdown, the silence that followed felt vast and cold. The victory felt hollow. I had done it. I had shattered their narrative. I had presented the undeniable $340 million proof. I had won. But I was sitting in my office at 7 a.m, nursing a cup of coffee, and I felt nothing, no joy, no relief, just a deep, profound exhaustion. Most of the guests were still asleep. Evelyn was reading in the library. The house was mine, but the victory felt like an ending, not a beginning. My phone, the weapon from the night before, was sitting on the desk. It was silent. I had left it on. They hadn't tried to call back after hanging up on Evelyn. I picked it up. The screen was dark. I tapped it, and it lit up. 3 new messages. They had arrived in the early hours, just before dawn. One from Natalie, one from Diane, one from Robert. They had coordinated their surrender. My thumb hovered. I felt a strange, cold detachment. I was an engineer reviewing a bug report. I tapped on Natalie's first. It was longer than I expected. Morgan. I'm sitting in my guest room. I can't sleep. Grant's parents were exactly what Mom wanted. Classy. And it was the most miserable, silent, cold dinner of my life. I saw the pictures. I heard what Dad said on the phone. I have to say this. I have been jealous of you for a long time, for my whole life. You got to be the smart one. You got to do whatever you wanted. I did the things they told me to. I followed their path. I married the right man. I had the right kids. I built the right life. And I'm miserable. I see what you built. That house. That feeling in those pictures. And I know it's real. I'm sorry. I'm just sorry. I read the text. Then I read it again. And a third time. Of all the scenarios I had imagined, this was not one of them. The golden child, the centerpiece of my mother's perfect table, was admitting she was just as much a product of their system as I was. She was the successful experiment. I was the failed one. And she was jealous of the failure. My first instinct was suspicion. Was this a new angle? A new manipulation? Was she trying to get on my good side now that she knew I had the money? I started to type a reply. Is this because of the money? I deleted it. That was an accusation. I typed again. It's a little late for that. Natalie. I deleted it. That was just bitterness. I typed again. Why are you telling me this now? I deleted it. I didn't want to know the answer. It didn't matter why. I looked at her words. I followed their path. It was the first truly honest thing I had ever heard her say. It was a confession. It wasn't an apology for what she did to me. It was an apology for who she was. Analyzing her motives was the old game. The game I had just won. The new game was simply accepting the facts as they were presented. The fact was, she had sent the message. I typed a new reply. 4 words. Thank you for saying that. It was not forgiveness. It was not acceptance. It was a neutral acknowledgement of receipt. I hit send. I went back to the main screen. One message from Diane. Your grandmother is right. I was wrong. I was so ashamed. The house is beautiful. I dissected it. The apology was there. I was wrong, but it was immediately followed by the validation. The house is beautiful. She was wrong because I was rich. She was ashamed because my proof was undeniable. Her apology was not for the 32 years of exclusion. It was for being on the wrong side of the bet. It was a concession, not a surrender. I didn't reply to that one. Then, Robert's, a separate thread. He couldn't even be part of a joint message. I am proud of you. 4 words, after a lifetime of silence, after hobby, after practical. I am proud of you. Proud of what? Proud of the algorithm, proud of the 16-hour days, proud of the risk, no. He was proud of the 340 million. He was proud of the number. The validation I had craved my entire life had finally arrived, and it felt like nothing. It was a check delivered to a person who had already died of starvation. It was worthless. I locked the phone and put it down. I felt nothing. Just a vast, cold quiet. The battle was over. The enemy had surrendered, but I was the only one left on the field. An hour later, as I was sitting on the terrace with Evelyn, the air sharp and cold, the phone buzzed again. A new text from Diane. Could we come see Gallatin Ridge? Sometime after the holiday, when your guests have left. There it was. Just the small family. My blood ran cold. The exact same phrase she had used to cut me out. This year our Thanksgiving is small. Was she really that tone-deaf? Or was it a deliberate, pathetic attempt to reclaim the term? To pretend it had always included me? I didn't need to guess. The intent was clear. They didn't want to see me. They wanted to see the house. The phone call had given them the number. The photographs had shown them the asset. Now they wanted the tour. They wanted to come and appraise my life. They wanted to touch the stone, to stand on the heated floors, to walk the halls of the place their new power resided. They wanted to see the vault. My first visceral reaction was disgust. No, absolutely not. The boundary must hold. They want to come visit, I said out loud. Evelyn, sitting across from me in a wicker chair, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, didn't even look up from her book. Of course they do, she said, as if I'd just commented on the weather. I'm not going to let them, I said, my voice harder than I intended. I'm not giving them a tour. It's not a prize. It's not some asset for them to inspect. No, Evelyn agreed, finally closing her book and placing it in her lap. It's not. It feels dirty, I continued, pacing the terrace. It feels like they just want to see the money, to renegotiate their position in the family, now that they know I'm the one with all of it. That is exactly what they want to do, Evelyn said calmly. So I should say no. You could, she said. She took a slow sip of her coffee, her eyes on the sharp, snow-dusted peak of the mountain across the valley. But a boundary, Morgan, is not just a wall. A wall is a fortress. It's built from fear. A boundary is a door. You control the lock. You control who comes in. And more importantly, you control the terms on which they enter. She looked at me, her eyes as clear as the cold air. You've proven you can build a wall. They're sitting on the other side of it, in the cold. Now, the real test is whether you know how to use the door. A flat no is simple. A yes, on these conditions. That is power. Let them in. But let them in on your terms. Make the rules clear, absolute, and non-negotiable. Don't let them in to see the house. Let them in to see if they are capable of following a single, simple instruction. That is the test. I stopped pacing. I looked at her. She was right. A flat no was what they had done to me. It was their move. My move would be different. It would be clinical. I picked up my phone. I went to Diane's text. I began to type. You may come for one evening, after my guests have departed. I paused, and then I wrote the rules. The terms of entry. We will have a simple dinner, not a tour. There will be no gifts, and no requests. We will not discuss money, my business, or my finances. We will not make comparisons. If you can agree to these 4 rules, you may come on Tuesday. I hit send. The reply was almost instantaneous. Okay, dear. Thank you. We can agree. The desperation was pathetic. They would agree to anything. I closed the phone. The test was set. I called Miles. Miles, we'll have 3 guests for dinner on Tuesday evening, my parents and my sister. Very good. Ms. Rogers. I'll alert Chef Vale's team and Mr. Cade." "No," I said, cutting him off. "That's the point. No Chef Vale, no Cade, no professional staff, just you, me, and one person from the kitchen to help with the basics. A simple meal, roasted chicken, a salad." He paused, understanding immediately. "The full wine list. No, the house red. The $10 bottle we serve at the staff party. This is not a performance. This is not an event. It is an observation." "Understood. Ms. Rogers, minimalist, austere." "Exactly." The Thanksgiving feast was an act of defiant, joyful abundance for the people I loved. This dinner would be an act of calculated, cold austerity. It was a test. They wanted to see the money. I would show them nothing but the rules. That evening, after Evelyn and my other guests had gone to bed, I went to my office. I sat at the desk in the dark. I thought about the coming dinner. I thought about their faces. My mother, desperate to please. My father, calculating. Natalie, silent and watchful. I knew what would happen. They would try. They would try to rewrite the story. They would try to pretend the exclusion was just a misunderstanding. "Oh, Morgan, we never meant it like that. We were just so stressed." They would try to deny. Evelyn's words came back to me. Set clear rules. My philosophy for Aegisgate had been zero trust. It was an architecture built on the assumption that every user, every device, every connection was a potential threat until proven otherwise. Verify everything, trust nothing. I would apply the same model to my family. I opened the top drawer of my desk. I took out a small, white, letter-sized envelope. It was empty. I swiveled in my chair to the computer. I opened my secure files. I found the audio file I had played the night before, the one that a panicked Aunt Ruth had forwarded to me weeks ago, after her conversation with my mother. The recording of Diane, her voice bright and gossipy, detailing her plan. "Just to impress Grant's parents, I want the table to look classy and sophisticated." It was the smoking gun, the undeniable proof of intent. I copied the audio file from my encrypted drive onto a small, black USB stick. I did not label the stick. I slid the USB stick into the plain white envelope and sealed it. I wrote nothing on the outside. I opened the desk drawer. I placed the envelope inside, underneath a stack of stationery. It was not a weapon. It was an insurance policy. It was the fire extinguisher on the wall. I did not want to use it, but I would be a fool to go into that dinner without it. This was not forgiveness. This was not a reunion. This was a controlled experiment. And I was not going to let the data be corrupted. I closed the drawer. The sound a soft, definitive click in the silent, dark house. I was ready for them. It was the following evening, Tuesday. The air in the house was different. It was not the warm, abundant, joyful chaos of Thanksgiving. It was still, clean, austere. I had Miles remove the 2 long dining tables. In their place, a single, much smaller round table, the one from the breakfast nook, was set in the middle of the vast, empty great room. It looked tiny, isolated. There was no music. The fire in the hearth was set, but it was burning low. When I saw the headlights of their Mercedes sweep across the long drive, I felt nothing. Not anger, not fear, not even anticipation. I felt like an engineer about to run a final diagnostic. I was simply observing. Miles opened the door. Robert, Diane, and Natalie walked in. They stopped, just inside the threshold, as if they had hit a glass wall. I was standing by the fireplace, watching them. They were dressed for a negotiation. Robert was in a dark blazer. Diane wore a silk blouse and pearls. Natalie was in a sharp, black sheath dress. They were dressed for a classy dinner. They were staring, but not at me. They were staring up, at the 30-foot-high timber beams, at the massive wall of glass that looked out onto the dark, snow-dusted valley, at the sheer, undeniable scale of the room. My mother's hand went to her pearls, a nervous, fluttering gesture. Robert's face was a mask, but his eyes were calculating. He was measuring the room. He was counting the windows. He was appraising the asset. Natalie was the only one who looked pale. Almost sick. She knew this was not a social call. "Welcome," I said. My voice sounded too loud in the stillness. "Please, sit." I gusted to the small, lonely table. They moved stiffly, their footsteps echoing on the stone floor. They sat, a single kitchen staffer, not Aurora, a local helper I'd retained, poured water from a simple glass pitcher. The rules were already in motion. This was not a performance. The staffer brought the first course, butternut squash soup. It was the same soup Aurora's team had made, but tonight it was served in simple, white bowls. There was no garnish. They ate in silence. The sound of their spoons scraping the porcelain was the only noise. My father cleared his throat. "Morgan, this house, it is truly something. I had no idea." "Yes," I said. "We're not here to talk about the house." My mother flinched. The staffer cleared the soup bowls. The main course arrived. A small, perfectly cooked piece of roasted fish, a simple apple and walnut salad, a bottle of the $10 house red, which they all politely declined. The austerity was the point. They had come to see the feast, to see the $340 million lifestyle. I was showing them a convent. They were terrified. The silence stretched, agonizing and heavy. They were waiting for me to speak. I did not. I ate my fish. Finally, Robert put his fork down. He couldn't take the silence. He was a man who controlled every room, and this one was not his. "Morgan," he started, his CEO voice attempting to take charge. I just want to say," I held up my hand. One simple, calm gesture. He stopped, his mouth open. "Before we do that," I said, my voice quiet, "we have to agree on the facts. The purpose of this dinner is truth and boundaries." Natalie looked down at her hands. Diane's face was ashen. What does that mean?" Diane whispered. "It means we have to start with the truth of why we're here." I said. Robert opened his mouth again. "Now, listen, your mother was just—" "Before," I said, my voice dropping, not in anger, but in cold, absolute finality. "Before the revisions, before the explanations, let's just listen to the original text." I reached over to my laptop, which was sitting on the sideboard, dark and silent. My hand was perfectly steady. I tapped the trackpad, and I played the audio file. My mother's voice, bright, clear, and gossipy, filled the vast, silent, cavernous room. "Oh, I know, Ruth, but Grant's parents are just, so particular. I want the table to look classy and sophisticated this year." The sound was obscene in the clean, quiet air. "So I'm just keeping it to Natalie's family. Just the small, immediate group. We have to impress them. I watched their faces. Robert froze. He had not heard this. He had not heard the reason. He had only known the plan. Natalie closed her eyes, her whole body tensing, as if waiting for a physical blow. Diane went white. A pure, bloodless, skeletal white. Her eyes were wide with a new, different kind of horror. Not the horror of being excluded, the horror of being caught. The audio file clicked off. The silence that rushed in was louder than the recording. It was a roar. My mother made a small, strangled sound. A tiny gasp. She whispered. Oh, God." She buried her face in her hands. She began to cry. Not the hysterical wails from the phone call. These were the small, ugly, gulping sobs of absolute, profound shame. Natalie, in a gesture that shocked me, reached over and put her hand on our mother's shaking shoulder. She didn't look at me. She just stared at the table. "I'm so ashamed." Diane wept into her hands. "I'm so ashamed." I watched them. The three of them, a perfect, miserable portrait of their own making. "You are," I said, my voice soft. "But you're ashamed in front of the wrong people." Robert looked up, his face confused. "What?" And then he heard it, from the deep shadows by the fireplace, a sound, the gentle click of a glass being set on a stone hearth. Robert's head snapped toward the sound. Evelyn, my grandmother, was sitting in the large armchair. She had been there, in the dark, the entire time. She just sat there, watching, her hands folded in her lap. Robert's blood drained from his face. "Mom," Diane whispered, lifting her head, her face blotched and wet. "Hello, Diane," Evelyn said, her voice carrying across the room. Then, from the massive dark archway that led to the library, another sound, a man clearing his throat. Uncle Emmett stepped out of the shadow. He was not smiling. His arms were crossed, his eyes fixed on the three of them at the table. Natalie made a small noise, her hand flying to her mouth, and they kept coming, from the stairs, Aunt Laurel and Aunt June, from the hallway, my cousins, Mike and Sarah. Mr. Doyle stepped out from beside the library, his face a mask of profound disappointment. Mrs. Hartley stood beside him, her small hands clasped. They emerged from the shadows, the entire unclassy family, the clutter, the chaff. I had invited them back. I had asked them to come, to stand, to listen, to be the jury. Robert, Diane, and Natalie were frozen. They were surrounded. This was not a dinner. This was a tribunal. My mother looked at me, her eyes wide with betrayal. You planned this," she breathed. "I planned for the truth to have witnesses." I said. I stood up. I picked up my water glass. I looked not at my parents, but at the family standing in the warm shadows of my home. "I don't need to be recognized," I said, my voice ringing in the vast room. "I'm done waiting for that, but I do require respect." I turned my gaze back to the pale, frozen faces at the table. At this house, at my table, no one is scored, no one is graded, no one is checked to see if they are classy enough, or successful enough, or impressive enough to be given a seat. I walked from the table toward the fireplace, toward my real family. This house was built on a foundation of work, not appearances, and this family, my family, will be built on a foundation of respect. I stood next to Evelyn. I looked at the far wall, a massive blank space of dark, polished walnut set between two stone columns. "You cut 18 people from your life to impress 2. I said. "You erased them." I reached for a thick, velvet cord that hung beside the panel. "I am making them permanent." I pulled the cord. A heavy cream-colored curtain drew back with a soft shush. It was not a painting. It was the wood panel itself, and it was not blank, engraved into the dark. Gleaming wood, in simple, elegant script, were names: Emmett, Laurel, June, Ruth, Michael, Sarah, Doyle, Hartley, Rowan, all of them, all the names of the people who had been at my Thanksgiving, a permanent list of the cast aside, the overlooked, the unclassy. Diane let out a sound, a high, thin keen. "Their names," I said, my voice low and final, "are now part of the structure of this house. They are a permanent part of my table. They are here for every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every dinner, from now until this house turns to dust." I turned, my back to the wall of names, and faced my parents. "This is the ultimate condition. This is the new boundary. You are welcome in this house, but the price of admission is that you honor them. You respect all of them. Everyone on that wall. Everyone in this room." I let the words hang in the air. If you can do that, the door is open. If you cannot, it will close, and it will never, ever open again. Those are the rules. The room was so quiet I could hear the embers crackle in the fireplace. Robert, Diane, and Natalie just sat there, small and colorless, trapped at their tiny table, judged and found wanting. The silence was broken by the sound of a small, silver bell. Tapped gently. Aurora Vale, whom I had asked to be here, stepped from the kitchen. She was in her black apron. She had not been cooking. She had been watching. She nodded at me. It was time for dessert, and from the shadows by the door, a flash. Cade. I had invited him back, too. He had captured the shot, the real shot, not the one of them, the one of us. Evelyn, Emmett, Mr. Doyle, and all the others. They were standing, they had their glasses raised, and they were toasting me. Cade caught the moment of their loyalty, and the moment of my family's stunned, silent defeat. I looked at the three of them, at my father, who was staring at the wall of names, his face gray, at my mother, who was weeping silently, at my sister, who just looked broken. I felt nothing, no victory, no pity, no anger, just quiet. I smiled, a small, calm, final smile. I walked over to the sideboard, past my humiliated parents. I picked up my phone. I turned it over, screen down, and set it on the polished wood. The dark glass of the screen reflected the warm light of the room. It reflected the faces of my real family, standing, reflected my grandmother's proud smile. It did not reflect the three people at the table. The screen was black. The house was quiet. Darkness. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below. Share your thoughts, and let's connect. Please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button to help this story be heard by more people.